Oh my goodness. Good morning, good afternoon. Whatever it is for you, I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Zach Schomler. This is Strong Opinion Sports, episode 652. Welcome in. And joining me today, I'm going to put him on screen right now, my good friend Nathan Hawthorne. Nathan, how are you?
What's going on, everybody? I'm doing great today.
I had to start with a one shot of me because they got to see the epic sunset happening behind me. It'd be
Yes.
criminal to start in split screen for them not to see the beauty
I
behind me.
mean, nobody wants to see books. Everybody wants to see the beautiful Pacific Northwest sunset. I'm on board with it.
On this episode, I'm going to play 8 different clips from 2023 from episodes. I believe it's episode 558 of Strong Opinion Sports, which is like almost 100 episodes ago. And at
Whew.
that point of recording, I had a curtain background behind me. It's kind of funny to like, it'll be the juxtaposition between like this recording setup and back then is so interesting to me. And one of my favorite things about SOS in general is like looking back at all of the different setups I've had over the years, like the truck, the curtain, Hawaii the first time, Hawaii the second time, like all of the crazy different
You've
backgrounds
had
I've had
some
over the years.
crazy setups. Some
Oh,
crazy
dude.
setups.
My favorite one was the truck. Like everyone hated on the truck. Sorry, I thought it was really cool. I had a really good time like doing that. I loved it, but everyone hated it, I guess.
It's impressive to put together a studio like that inside of a truck. That just speaks to the creativity.
Dude, I will say, and I will die on this hill forever, it's the best my audio has ever sounded. Something about the acoustics of a car, like it just perfectly. That's why
Huh.
when you sing in your car, you sound amazing. Like you feel like you sound better. You actually
I
do
don't.
sound better. You,
I definitely do not.
you just sound bad always.
Just always not sounding great.
So today's episode, first of all, so during episode 558, almost 100 episodes ago, I did predictions for the 2023 season. Today's episode is all about the AFC and NFC West. But before we do anything, before we get into predictions versus reality, I want to actually read a question from Patreon. I've been saving this for a long time, knowing I wanted to read this question when you were on the show. I think it'd be fun to have two people that played football going back and forth about this. Here's a question from Deeply Closeted on Patreon, writes in and says, "Hey Zach, did you have any pregame rituals or superstitions back in your playing days? Thanks." So I don't know that I did. I had like wristbands, I guess. That's about it. I didn't really have anything crazy I did. I feel like you might have had superstitions. Did you when you played?
I mean, there's always the locker room superstitions, right? Where you're tapping the signs or you're hitting the wall on the way out. But for
Mm-hmm.
myself, the last song I would listen to, well, the song I would listen to on the way, the pull up song, right? Whether you're getting off the bus or you're getting out of the car because it's a home game, we're listening to Break Bread by Andre Nicotina. And then the last song I listened to before Coach gathers us up and we head out, Break Bread by Andre Nicotina. It is just one of the dopest songs you can listen to. I don't know what it is about it. My boy Jack Scantel put me on it way back in the day, and it just became my thing. That was really the only like ritual I had. And then in the morning, I always had oatmeal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the pregame meal is a big deal. Like I know guys that would have like junk food or garbage, like a bad meal game day, and I'm like, that's crazy. Like the fuel you put in your body on game day feels really important to me. At least it always did. I was like, I'm gonna be really
Yeah,
careful with that.
yeah. You eat well the night before. Depending on that game time, you eat well the night before. In the morning, you wake up. You want to put some easy carbs for your body to digest inside your system. Some fresh fruit, some things that are going to keep you feeling light, but give you the energy for the rest of the day.
Here's my question. Sounds like you were a hype music guy. Like you liked the pump up music that made you want to like hit somebody. Is that accurate?
A little bit, but don't get me wrong. I listen to some slow jams out there. When
Dude,
you're getting the footwork through, when you're stretching, ooh, a little Chris Brown, a little Trey Songz. Come on.
I learned like midway through my senior year, well after we played you guys in high school, I learned that I needed to listen to classical music. Like because like all the above stuff like that will like get me too hyped up. And I'm like, going into the first quarter, I'm like kind of amped up. I'm like not quite in rhythm. I'm not settled down. If I listen to classical music during warmups, I was very zen, which as a quarterback, that's kind of what you got to be. You can't really go into the game like, let's freaking go, like headbutting people, like hitting things. Like you actually have to kind of, at least for me, I had to be very like relaxed and chill and zen as a quarterback. And that's when I played my best, when I was kind of like just easygoing and chill and not like all hyped up and like headbutting people and freaking out.
Yeah, different strokes for different folks.
Let's start by talking about the Kansas City Chiefs today, if we will. And let's play a clip right now first from episode 558, long time ago on the curtain background. This is what I said going into the 2023 season about the Kansas City Chiefs. I feel like every year there's some new narrative. Oh no, they lost this guy and it's going to really affect their season and they're not going to be the same without insert literally any name. I got to just really be clear here. As long as they have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City is going to be a Super Bowl contender. And I feel like it somehow doesn't get enough attention that they literally lost what I would call the best receiver in the NFL, Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill left the team, got traded to Miami. So they lost again, arguably the best receiver in the NFL. And then right after that happened, that same year, Kansas City won the Super Bowl. They lost Tyreek Hill and still won the Super Bowl. That was a cornerstone moment for me. And I'm not going to forget this. I am not going to forget when every fall from here on out, the rest of Patrick Mahomes' career, there's a narrative like, oh no, they lost this player or that guy. I'm going to say, well, remember when Tyreek Hill left and they won a Super Bowl? Let's not hit the panic button. They've got Patrick Mahomes. They've got Andy Reid. They're a Super Bowl contender. They're a really good football team. So this fall, I have Kansas City going 12-5. 12-5, they're going to win their division, make a deep playoff run. That is what I see happening this fall with Kansas City. And the big question mark, can they get pressure on opposing quarterbacks, especially early on with Menahu out? And how do their young receivers, Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney, play as they get elevated into bigger roles than ever before? So I think I absolutely crushed this prediction. I didn't nail every one, right? We'll talk about the Cardinals. We'll talk about the Rams one is like horrendously off. But this one, I feel like I nailed. I predicted they would go 12-5 and win their division. I said that losing Tyreek Hill didn't hurt them. They went to a Super Bowl and won without Tyreek Hill. They're just going to reload and do it again. And, in the reality, they went 11-6 to win their division, won a second Super Bowl in a row. And for me, I was really staunch in the fact that as long as you got Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid at quarterback and coach, you're going to be a Super Bowl contender. That not only was true, they weren't just a contender, they won the Super Bowl. But what did you make of what you heard me say going into the 2023 season about Kansas City?
Yeah, I think that was the staple, right? You have Andy Reid and you got Patrick Mahomes. That's going to be kind of your core and your base. Everything else was relatively accurate. I thought what you brought up about George Karlaftis and the impact that he may or may not have would be a great indication of how this team performs. Re-signing Chris Jones, having Karlaftis, and then being able to have that back end with Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed ended up having Pat Mahomes' best defense and Andy Reid's best defense that they've had. Although the offensive production wasn't what we were used to as far as having these big firework explosive plays, and even kind of moved back a little bit from even the previous year when Juju was the primary leading receiver. I thought we saw the Chiefs really balance each other out this year with sound fundamental defense, as well as having an offense that could move the chains when absolutely necessary. So yeah, you were spot on.
The dirty secret about this Kansas City Super Bowl, the second one in a row, is that it was won by their defense. I mean, they had the second most sacks in football. They had 57 sacks this year. Only the Ravens had more with 60. George Karlaftis and Chris Jones both had 10.5 sacks each, which tied them for 17th most with Nick Bosa, Harold Landry, and Leonard Floyd. So the production on the defensive side of the football is the story here. Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator, was amazing. And, one other thing we talked about going into the year was I talked about Eric Bieniemy and how I think, unfortunately, like the worst thing you could say about him is that they're not going to miss him. And I look at the coordinator position in Kansas City as like a dream job. You get to be working under Andy Reid. Patrick Mahomes is your quarterback. Whether you're offensive or defensive coordinator, you should never leave that job. I think we always talk about the grass is greener on the other side, and Eric Bieniemy tried to go to Washington. That didn't work. Now he's in UCLA. I'm an offensive coordinator now in high school football, and I have no desire to ever be a head coach. That's a lot of work. I don't want to do it. I don't want to recruit players. I don't want to do all the work that is required to be a head coach. I like the X's and O's and focusing on that. And I told Jay, my head coach at David Douglas, I'm like, look, man, I'm never, ever gunning for your job. I don't want to be a head coach. That's like just not something I want to do. In fact, I love that I have a coach who takes care of all the business. I get to do all the other, I get the fun stuff for me, and he does all the hard stuff. Eric Bieniemy shouldn't have never left. He should have just enjoyed winning multiple Super Bowls with Patrick Mahomes. And I think the same can be said for Steve Spagnuolo. I think he's going to do exactly that. He's going to sit, hang out as defensive coordinator. I don't think he wants to be a head coach again. And he's enjoying the spoils and the riches of having a great head coach, Andy Reid, and an incredible quarterback in Patrick Mahomes. And I think that's the right move. Does that make sense to you? Like, I think you got a good thing going. Why ruin it?
Yeah, everybody has a different ambition, right? You look at Spagnuolo; he's been in the league, a lot longer than Eric Bieniemy has. Like he's been around the league a bunch. So for him, I don't want to say moonlighting his career because he still has plenty of great years left. Calling games on the defensive side of the football. But Bieniemy might just be looking for, a little bit more. I think both him and Kellen Moore, no pun intended, both kind of took that shot of let me take this coordinator position elsewhere. And when that coach is on the hot seat and on the way out, I'm going to rise up into that position. That ultimately didn't end up working out for either of them. I thought Bieniemy probably had a better chance than Kellen Moore did, but I think the Chiefs really did miss the discipline that Bieniemy was known to bring in terms of hard coaching. We saw that receiving core have a really, really rough start to the year, not being where they needed to be, misalignment, wrong routes, and therefore leading to some pretty inaccurate passes that we saw from Patrick Mahomes. And that offense really struggled to score. It wasn't until late in the season when they started to find their groove where things really started to take off. And I think that with Bieniemy, anytime you change a coordinator, you're going to have a learning curve. And I think that the learning curve with bringing in Matt Nagy, as well as the not the lack of discipline, the missing element of extreme discipline from Eric Bieniemy and that attention to detail, I think we saw the Chiefs suffer through that a little bit. Ultimately ended up, I think, benefiting them because they were a little bit more battle tested and wear tested throughout the year and were able to withstand, those punches from some high scoring offenses later in the postseason.
In the draft this year, the 2024 draft in April, first pick, or their 20th pick of the first round, they drafted Xavier Worthy, the receiver out of Texas. And they did that because the young guys they had, Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney, just did not make an impact this year. Going into the year, I was really hoping like, hey, they lost Tyreek Hill. They're going to reload. They got Sky Moore, speed demon. They've got Kadarius Toney, both guys with a lot of talent and potential. And I thought they were going to reach their potential and maybe have a great year. No, the second leading receiver, the leading receiver not named Travis Kelce in Kansas City was Rashee Rice, a second-round pick out of, I believe, SMU. That's correct. And then behind him, the third leading receiver in Kansas City was Justin Watson, a fifth-round pick in 2018 out of University of Pennsylvania. Like, no offense to Justin Watson. Dude, you had a great year, but you're a no-name guy. I mean, that really says a lot about Kansas City that Rashee Rice and Justin Watson were their leading outside receivers. It's pretty alarming, and that's why they drafted Xavier Worthy. I think Xavier Worthy could become what I was hoping maybe Sky Moore or Kadarius Toney could be this year, but I was disappointed that neither one of them reached their potential or had a big year. I was just hoping for more production from them, and we didn't see it at all in Kansas City with those young receivers.
Yeah, it was certainly a tough start. And like I said, it kind of finished very strong, especially for Rice in particular. Sounds like there were some locker room things going on with Kadarius Toney that kind of prevented his progression throughout the year. But it sounds like they're utilizing him in camp currently. So it'll be interesting just as this year plays out with that addition of Worthy, what it's going to look like on that offensive side of the football.
We should acknowledge that, Kadarius Toney became a meme, basically. I mean, I see pictures of him all the time. He's got like the ski mask
He really
on
did.
and the hands, like he's got like bricks on his hands because he can't catch anything. I mean, that dude got raked over the coals all year in 2023. I felt kind of bad for him by the end of the season. He won a Super Bowl, sure, but man, he got roasted like over and over and over again.
That whole receiving core did. Marquez Valdez-Scantling did. Yeah, Kadarius Toney did. Rashee Rice did. Watson did. Everybody took a pretty big beating, just from the media this year, outside of the defense.
You want to talk about Denver?
Yeah, let's talk about Denver.
Here is what I said August last year, going into the 2023 season about the Denver Broncos. My prediction for the Broncos season. This year, Denver finally finally, hallelujah, has a head coach that I think can help them take advantage of their great roster and reach their potential as a football team. The biggest concern and the biggest question mark in Denver is obviously their quarterback, Russell Wilson. He was all-time bad last year. Russell Wilson is a once great quarterback, a guy who won a Super Bowl in Seattle, made a lot of money in his career, and yet he finds himself in a position now where Russ has a lot to prove. And I think you could blame last year on having a bad head coach and a disaster with your coaching staff, but there's no excuses now. They've got a good football team, a great head coach. And Denver traded a lot, not only to get Russell Wilson, but then they paid a lot to Russell Wilson to give him a contract extension in Denver. So Denver's heavily invested in Russell Wilson. It's time for him to repay the investment they made in him. And I think it's very simple this fall. You either believe that Sean Payton is the answer in Denver or you don't. I think he is. I think Sean Payton's going to be amazing in Denver. I see Denver getting completely turned around here this year and finally reaching their potential as a football team. And it's going to be year one of building towards a Super Bowl in Denver. That's what they're trying to do. Sean Payton said, I would be mad if this team didn't make the playoffs. I actually very much agree. It's a team that's very capable of that. And with good coaching and smart decision-making, they can definitely do that. Last year, they had a horrible coach and a good football team. But I think what I'm going to see, I think Denver's going to go 10-7 this year. That's still 5 more wins than last year. And I think Russell Wilson's going to work with Sean Payton. I don't think he's going to be a superstar like he used to be, but he's not going to be garbage. Russell Wilson's highly coachable. He's the guy who's going to fall in line, listen to Sean Payton. I believe Sean Payton's a great coach who's going to put in positions to do well. You're going to see Denver grow a ton and really change. They got a new head coach making a lot of sweeping changes, and I think it's going to work out at a really, really high level. I really buy into and I believe in Sean Payton working well in Denver. All right, well, it's time to face the music. Man, I thought it was going to go well. I mean, I really did. I guess that's the only thing I can say. I predicted Denver would go 10-7, and I thought adding Sean Payton would really help their season. And it's unfortunate that didn't happen at all. I mean, I guess I want to be clear about this though. I said they would go 10-7, they went 8-9, and Russ had a good year. He had 3,000 yards passing, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, completed over 66% of his passes. Like on paper, Russ wasn't terrible. And they were close to my prediction, but it just didn't go the way I thought. I thought it was going to be a home run and a great fit between coach and quarterback, and that just simply did not happen at all in Denver. What do you make of what I said?
Yeah, I think you got it right with having Sean Payton and was going to help get this team organized and help Russ play more efficiently, which he did 100%. The one thing I thought that was a little bit off about last year's prediction was a talented roster. I did not think that Denver roster was very talented. There were some big names. However, I don't think that they were truly very talented, especially where they needed to be talented at. Ultimately, I think their run game struggled to be consistent as well. I think we all thought Javonte Williams was going to have a much stronger comeback off that ACL, and at times he showed spurts of it. But there was never really a true commitment to that run game. I think we saw Russ be scared and kind of tuck the ball a couple times instead of cutting some loose, which is what we saw late in Seattle as well, kind of holding on to it just a little bit longer than necessary, and then asking guys like Cortland Sutton to bail you out on a consistent basis, which he did. He was an excellent player for them. But at the end of the day, I just don't think that roster was very talented. It was a tough division. They had a decently tough schedule last year, and I just don't think that they really wanted Russ to be quarterback, and I don't think that they wanted to win as many games as they did.
Yeah, it's interesting with hindsight. So first of all, I have to acknowledge, I think it's time to let go of the notion of them being a great team. I really, for years, I was hanging on to this idea like they got great players, they're just poorly coached. And they went from coach to coach to coach. And I kept saying, like, it's not the players. They got Cortland Sutton. They got, who's that receiver? Jerry Jeudy. They had all these weapons. I was like, man, it's going to be awesome. And it just never panned out. And by the time you get to your third coach in 3 years and it's still not going well, it's like, well, my interpretation of these players just I got to admit it's wrong. I thought Russ really struggled to play in structure. He really, and I'm fascinated to see how Pittsburgh's going to use him this year. I think he's going to use play action a lot, throw moon balls deep to George Pickens. I think they're not going to ask him to play in rhythm as much. He's going to be more of a play action passer, quite frankly, taking shots downfield vertically. In rhythm, he couldn't play like Drew Brees. I mean, that's a reality. Like I expected maybe an evolution of Russ where he get the ball out of his hands quickly and frankly play differently than he has his entire career, and he just didn't do that. We saw Russ just not run that offense very efficiently, and ultimately got benched for Jarrett Stidham at the end of the year. One thing too, I really thought that they were going to work well together. I thought maybe Sean Payton would embrace Russ and they'd have a great relationship. That did not happen. In fact,
Ooh.
I think like Sean Payton was ready to go, and it's like I would rather deal with a rookie quarterback who knows nothing, so I can mold him in my image, rather than trying to teach an old dog new tricks. It's kind of really the interpretation I got with them moving on from Russ and drafting Bo Nix. It was very cut and dry that they're like, look, I don't want a veteran quarterback at all. I want a young guy who will listen to me and doesn't have opinions on maybe what we should be doing. I think Russ really tried to work with him and wanted to speak his mind and have input in the offense. And Sean Payton did not want any input. He's like, no, it's my way or the highway. And it's just a big miss. I mean, I remember, they started 0-3. Do you remember the game week 3 against Miami? The legendary, they lost 70-20. And it was just horrifying. Miami had over 700 yards on offense, and it was
Horrible.
a beatdown. It was like the worst start possible. I remember even identifying in my prediction, like, hey, this game is going to be a tough one for them early on. They're getting ready. I never could have imagined to lose by 50 points in an NFL game the way they did. It was like watching NCAA or Madden or something. It was just like this, they're still scoring again. Like, oh my gosh.
At that point, even with how much they were paying Russ, I really thought they were going to commit to the tank and just say, hey, you know what? We're going to wrap it up already this year. There's nothing left for us. Obviously, Sean Payton, far too proud to allow that to happen, along with other members on that staff. But yeah, just a all-around bad season for the Broncos. I don't think that roster has gotten much better either.
Do you think it's actually maybe fair to say that given the 0-3 start, given that their third game was just a shameful beatdown, to finish the year 8-9 and get somewhat of a respectable record is actually kind of an accomplishment? Would you agree on that?
Yeah, it was absolutely an accomplishment. Again, depleted roster. You had that Tim Patrick injury early in the season. Javonte not really panning out. Your defense kind of trying to keep things muddy for other offenses and keep you in the game. But I don't think at any point this year we looked at them and said, hey, they are the odds-on favorite to win this game. Every game that they won this year was like, oh my goodness, they kind of pulled that game out. And that's never where you want to be.
So listen to this. They had a 5-game stretch. At the end of week 6, they were 1-5. Then they won 5 games in a row and ended up 6-5 at the end of it. They beat Green Bay 19-17. They beat Kansas City in Denver. They went on the road at Buffalo, beat Buffalo 24-22. They beat Minnesota 21-20. And then they beat Cleveland 29-12. Those are their 5 best games of the year. That's an accomplishment to go 1-5 to start the year. And after 5 more games into the year, you're 6-5 to win 5 in a row that way. It's really, I think the jury's still out on Sean Payton, right? We'll see what happens with Bo Nix. I think this is kind of the last rodeo for him. He's got to do well with Bo Nix or Zach Wilson. Whatever happens this year, it can't be a disaster. Mm-hmm. But I think you can make a pitch to Denver, the city of Denver, the ownership group there, everybody there. Hey, Sean Payton salvaged our season. He's a good coach. He just needs more time. And I thought the way the year ended bought Sean Payton maybe 2 more years of goodwill, not just 1 more year of like, hey, he figured it out. I think he's got work to do, and the team isn't right. But he didn't create this situation. He inherited a bad situation. And by the end of the year, 8-9 is a really good record for Denver, which, again, I really think he bought himself minimum 2 more years to try to figure it out.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Anytime you close the year, strong or have a winning record to close out the year or close to, your outlook for the next year is better. Number one, Sean Payton's first year coaching the Broncos, right? He had to clean up the mess. And second, you had the scapegoat. They blamed Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson couldn't do this. He wouldn't play in the offense, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you ship him out the door. Now we draft a rookie quarterback. Now you really get another year and then probably up until midway through the season next year to prove that Bo Nix is going to be your guy. So yeah, absolutely bought himself another couple years.
I thought last year was a year of no excuses for Russ. Like, hey, if you can't figure it out with Sean Payton, maybe time to move on. And now we've moved on from Russ. We're in a period where now it's no more excuses for Sean Payton. It's time to win. It's time to figure it out. I think you get a buffer year. You got a rookie quarterback, but if midway through next year, so this is 2024 and 25, if midway through the season that starts in 2025, we're not winning, if like October 2025 things are going well, I think Sean Payton gets fired. Would you agree on that?
I think the Broncos, knowing the organization that they are and how long they kept Nat Hackett in there. Hold on, do I have that wrong?
Well, they fired Nathaniel Hackett after 1 year, but I did, to me, it felt like he could have been fired much earlier. They really kind of wrote it out for a long time. I think that's what
it was. Yeah. So I think
it was one season, but it was like, hey, why did this take so long to make this move?
Right. So do a little reverse here. So you look at how long they held on to Nat Hackett, and that was a dumpster fire to start. Sean Payton, a legacy guy around the NFL. I don't think that the Broncos organization is going to do that to Sean Payton. Somebody else, maybe, but I think that they would allow him to finish out the year. Not this year, but, future years.
He's making roughly $18 million a year, got a 5-year contract that started in 2023. So 3, 2, 5, 6, 7. His contract's up in 2027. Yeah. That's right. I forgot about that trade. The absolute best thing to do during the summer is go watch an MLB game. You, your friends, you have a cold drink, a hot dog. MLB games are a great time, and the Game Time app makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the start of any sporting event. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Here's what Game Time does for you. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They've got flash deals where you can save, even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. There are zone deals where you save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats for you. They've all-in pricing where toggling this feature shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. There are seat views in the app where you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy tickets. Game Time has the lowest price guarantee, meaning Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets for cheaper. And Game Time has ticket coverage, meaning your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and use the code CLNS to redeem $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. I don't know, man. I'm really fascinated. I guess you're right. I guess he's got 2 years minimum. I think maybe at the end of the year that starts in 2025, not this year, but next year, if by the end of 2 years from now, it's not good, you probably got to move on. But
yep, absolutely.
I don't know, man. To me, Sean Payton comes across as very unlikable, actually. I want to like him. I used to love him. I read his book. I thought he was awesome. I thought the way he handled the Russell Wilson situation, kind of the flippant comments he made about the draft, I was a mastermind behind us getting Bo Nix. I'm like, dude, nobody wanted Bo Nix. Like, don't act like he was a top 5 pick that you just fleeced everybody and made him into. But you know what I mean? He acted like he tricked everyone into not drafting Bo Nix. And it's like, dude, you're talking weird. I just don't understand what you're saying. And I wonder how much ego is attached to Sean Payton's idea of himself. And if that plays a role in him succeeding or failing, I'm curious. Like, as the years go on, are people going to run out of energy working with him? Are they going to not want to work with him at all? Or do I have a bad read? I'm fascinated as the years go on what to make of Sean Payton.
Remains to be seen.
Let's talk about the LA Chargers. Here's what I said going into the 2023 season about the LA Chargers. I am really skeptical of Chargers head coach Brandon Staley. He's going into his third year, and so far, he's only disappointed me. How is this team different than the years past where they've disappointed? They've had great players for years, and it's been disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. What's dramatically different? They got a new offensive coordinator who got fired from his last job. We'll see. I've got an open mind. They've got a new receiver. That's going to be awesome, but it's really more for their future as Keenan Allen and Mike Williams get older. I don't know, man. A lot of these players on the Chargers roster, they're great. But I wonder if they're past their prime. And they're getting older every year. I mean, I know they're not getting younger, I guess, but I have the Chargers going 7-10 this fall. 7 wins, 10 losses. And Brandon Staley is a defensive head coach with a ton of stars on their defense. Why is their defense not amazing? It's time for their defense to play well. First of all, if that's your calling card, you got to be good at it. And if they go 7-10 this fall, 7 wins, 10 losses, there better be consequences for Brandon Staley. Coaching matters. And I've watched the Chargers for years now flounder in mediocrity with great players, totally underachieve. And if you're underachieving year in and year out, it's because your coaching staff is wrong and your head coach probably is the wrong guy. And so I've lost all faith and confidence in Brandon Staley. I hope I'm wrong, but that is why I have the Chargers going 7-10. I was not surprised at all. I think, in fact, my prediction was pretty close. I had 7-10. They went 5-12. But really, the hallmark of my prediction was, hey, I don't believe in their coach, Brandon Staley. I think he's, if not going to get fired, he should get fired. But I was literally worried that maybe LA, the Chargers organization, wouldn't pull the trigger and move on from the guy because they're such a frustrating organization to follow.
It was looking like that for a minute there.
And they finally did it, but it was an ugly year. Justin Herbert got hurt. He didn't play from week 14. He missed the final 4 games of the year. Mm-hmm. It was a bad year all around. And here's really the true crime for the LA Chargers. They had a bunch of big names on defense. They had a defensive head coach, and they were ranked 28th out of 32 teams on defense. Like, that cannot happen when you've got a defensive coach and a ton of veterans on defense. That just, especially expensive veterans.
Expensive veterans.
Man, that you can't do that. You can't be a defensive head coach with an awful defense paying guys a ton of money. It's just that the math doesn't add up there.
Say what you will about the Jets, but Robert Saleh has his defense playing very, very well. That is not the case and not what we saw with the Chargers the whole entire time Justin Herbert has been there since he got drafted, right? Initially, they didn't want to start him. Then coach gets fired. You bring in Brandon Staley, kind of this unproven defensive guy when you've got a young Justin Herbert that you want to develop and nurture. And then all of a sudden, you've got a bottom 28 defense year after year after year. You finally get to the playoffs. You have an epic meltdown defensively and honestly offensively as well. But yeah, I don't think anybody truly believed in Brandon Staley. I think a couple things were evident. One, he didn't have control of the locker room. And 2, I don't think Brandon Staley was ever great at learning from his mistakes. He would reference analytics a lot. He would talk about go for it on 4th down. Why did we punt here? Why did we go for it? Why did we kick a field goal? Why didn't we try to score? He was constantly under fire for these questions because he displayed inconsistency on what he even wanted to do. If he was like Dan Campbell, right, and just said, no, 4th down, we're going for it every time, no questions asked. Then you get to the podium and people ask, and you can say, hey, that's our identity. But when you have to explain your way in and out of every situation, in and out of every close win that you just couldn't pull out week after week after week, that tells me a lot about how you communicate not just to the media, but to your team. Are you showing up on a week-to-week basis telling your team the exact same things? Applying the same sort of standard for your team across the board, layering down from yourself to your coaching staff, to the veterans, to the rookies, to everybody. It just at no point seemed like anybody was on the same page.
Guess where he ended up? Do you know where Staley's coaching right now?
No, I don't.
He's with the 49ers.
Interesting. He would be an assistant though, because they hired Nick Sorensen, I believe,
Yep.
to be their defensive coordinator. Okay.
Yeah, he's an assistant head coach, which that means they're holding him in their back pocket until they can make him defensive coordinator someday. And I think I want to be very clear. I don't think he's a terrible coach as far as he was a great defensive coordinator for the Rams. Now, hear me out. I think some people you go to head coach and the responsibility is so much greater and you're not effective as a coordinator anymore either. I think you get so much responsibility as head coach and you're overseeing everything. You're ineffective at everything you're doing.
I would probably have a decent time as the defensive coordinator for the Rams when you have Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey in their prime. I'm not
Fair
saying
enough.
that's all it, but I think that he benefited from being a part of a great culture top down that,
Yeah.
like you said, can make it easier when you don't have to manage everything top down. It certainly makes it easier. But I also think that he benefited from an excellent, excellent defense with two, Hall of Famers, essentially. At the pass rushing position inside double teams with Aaron Donald, and then of course Jalen Ramsey, a shutdown corner and a physical tackler.
So I know someone who played for Brandon Staley, who loves him, like says that the energy he brings as a coordinator and frankly the culture he's created to work in is really healthy. Like he's a great boss to work for. And as time went on in LA, they went from we really like you to we want to like you, but you're not making the right decisions. And it was like guys didn't hate him; they were just disappointed. Like they're like, maybe we want him to be awesome, but it's not working. It's rare. Like they didn't hate him, which is like a very I think telling about him as a person.
Yeah, it's like that really cool boss that you love to show up to work and see, and maybe go grab a beer with him at some time after work, but if they're not making the right decisions or the decisions that enable you to be the best, it's like, man, come on, like help me out here a little bit. And I think that's the frustrating part. I think more frustration and disappointment than a complete lack of faith to Staley's football knowledge.
A couple of years ago, Pat Shurmur went from the offensive coordinator of the Vikings to head coach of the Giants. He was a disaster as a head coach, horrible. But still, that doesn't take away from the year previously. He was an incredible offensive coordinator. And I really will always believe some people are coordinators and they get promoted too far. And then, because I'm telling you, I coach football now. Like head coach and coordinator are just completely different positions. It's not even funny. As a head coach, you're overseeing so many other things. There's so much more going on. Your responsibility is so much greater. And you're really kind of managing people and delegating and directing traffic. Where as a coordinator, you're game planning, you're making, you're way more hands-on with the football side of stuff. Whereas head coach is actually hands-off and just delegating to people all the time. And I just think it's very likely that the skill sets are just totally different between head coach and coordinator. And I still think he might have the skill set to be a good coordinator. It just was a terrible head coach. And then when you're trying to do a head coach and you're doing it poorly, you also are ineffective as a defensive coordinator too. So he just ended up spread so thin. He was terrible at everything he did. And I don't know why I'm suddenly like the guy defending Brandon Staley.
You got this crazy soft spot in here for him.
I guess as I've heard people,
coordinator.
Well, I bet people have told me like he's a good dude. And I know people who've gone to work for him and they're like, look, he's a great man to work for. He just they were disappointed rather than hating him, which is just it's a very weird like needle threading the needle of like, this doesn't work, but no one hates him. And that's just very rare to find in football.
Yeah, I hear that.
I think it worked out though. They got Jim Harbaugh out of Michigan, and I'm excited. Are you excited about this Chargers team, like the future of them, what they're doing?
I am excited, but I'll save that for when we start talking about this year's predictions.
Okay. Well, let's then talk about the Raiders. Here's what I said going into the Raiders season, going into 2023 for the Las Vegas Raiders. I feel really bad for Raiders receiver Devontae Adams. I feel less bad for him when I look at his contract. You're like, oh yeah, he's making millions. He's totally fine. But he came to Vegas to play for the Raiders and play with his buddy Derek Carr. And then after 1 year together, the Raiders got rid of Derek Carr. Now, the Raiders' new quarterback is Jimmy Garoppolo. Certainly, he was a cheaper option, which, hey, that does matter. Like, you don't want to overpay your quarterback, and if you can pay your quarterback less, you can build a better team around said quarterback. So I actually understand the thought process there. If Jimmy Garoppolo is a similar ability level to Derek Carr, but comes in at a cheaper option and has a better relationship with the head coach Josh McDaniels, fair enough. My number one concern with Jimmy Garoppolo is actually whether he can stay healthy or not. He's played one full season. I think people don't realize that. I don't have confidence Jimmy Garoppolo can finish the year. He's going to get hurt. To me, the Raiders are the worst team in the AFC West. I actually have the Raiders finishing the year at 4-13. 4 wins, 13 losses. I'm concerned about their quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm concerned he's going to get hurt. I'm concerned about his ability level. Can he stay healthy? The offensive line concerns me. I don't have a lot of faith in their defense. But the biggest problem is this. This is the number one issue with the Raiders football team. I don't believe in their head coach, Josh McDaniels. I'm not sure he's ever going to work in Vegas, actually. He was once the head coach in Denver. He was a disaster. Last year in year one with the Raiders wasn't great. He basically ruined Derek Carr's career. Made him look worse than ever. And I look at the Raiders, I see a team with a average roster and a below average head coach. And so that is why I have the Raiders going 4-13 this year. It's just not a great team, and it's definitely not a great coach. So the thing that I am very proud of that I really nailed was I went in saying I feel so bad for Raiders receiver Davante Adams. Like, they got rid of his quarterback. He's stuck with Jimmy Garoppolo. And we now know, based on that show Receiver, based on some of the stuff he said, like, he was a big Davante Adams frustration was a big part of why they moved on from Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think that the year didn't go the way I thought exactly. I predicted they would go 4-13. They went 8-9. But that's with a twist added in. They actually won more after they fired their head coach. I was not a fan at all of Josh McDaniels, and I was very skeptical of him. And he didn't even make it through the season. He got fired. I don't know, man. What'd you make of my prediction? I thought in a weird way, even though the prediction, the final number was off, it got kind of screwed up by Antonio Pierce coming in at the end and doing a fairly good job. What'd you make of my prediction?
I honestly thought the prediction was very spot on. 4-13 sounded about right for this team. Bringing in Jimmy G, I know everyone was excited to have, Davante Adams, Jimmy G. Like, we just need someone to deliver him the ball. And you've seen Jimmy Garoppolo throughout his career display the ability to at least get the ball to the playmakers, right? But we saw none of that. And then we also have to talk about Jimmy G's just never healthy. And when he is playing, sometimes he's not fully healthy. And you kind of start to add and mix those things together. And then you start to see those frustrations boil over for the rest of the team. I think we're also underestimating how big of an impact Josh Jacobs not being in camp had. He had to play his way into shape and play his field vision into shape as the year was going. So I think that run game struggled early when Jimmy Garoppolo really, really needed the run game to be strong. The defense, started to find an identity, that tough nose Antonio Pierce kind of energy towards the end of the season. But yeah, I am shocked that the Raiders pulled off in what was it, 8-9, an 8-9 record this year. There are a couple games this year, like a game against the Jets, that Monday Night Football game that could have gone either way. So there's a couple games in there that this very easily could have been a 4-13, 5-12 season.
Yeah, they salvaged a really bad situation, in my opinion. And
to no benefit to them, by the way.
Yeah, like winning didn't help them at all. It actually made their draft pick worse. Like, congrats, I guess. I thought the move to Jimmy Garoppolo never made a lot of sense. They got a cheaper, worse quarterback. Like, congratulations, right? I just never, and it's very clear watching some of the film and watching stuff back. Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't have the ability to stretch the field. I mean, there's so many moments where Davante Adams has shots downfield, and the ball's not in the right spot. And Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't know. I don't want to hate on the guy too much, but he just doesn't have the ability to stretch the field. It's just the fact. I mean, like he just doesn't have what's required. So for a receiver like Devontae Adams, it would be so frustrating to be like, dude, I'm open. And I know that's a typical thing receivers say,
Right.
like it's a joke, like I'm open on every play. But like he actually was open all the time, and like
he is always open.
and like he wasn't getting the football. And it's like, dude, I would be again. Think about his perspective for a second. You make a move away from Aaron Rodgers to go play with your college teammate Derek Carr. You get 1 year together, then the organization ships him off. They cut him. He goes to New Orleans, and then he gets stuck with freaking Jimmy Garoppolo and this coach who sucks. And it's just like, man,
I'd be pissed. And
dude.
it's hot and gross in Vegas.
Yeah.
Ugh,
I mean,
I'd
at
be
least he's
pissed.
making tons of money, so there's kind of some crocodile tears there. But it's definitely not how Devontae Adams thought his career was going to go.
No,
it took
not
a
at all.
turn because of the Raiders' frankly bad decision making, and because they gave power to Josh McDaniels and made it like the Patriots Nevada, basically. It just didn't make sense. I really don't respect what Josh McDaniels did. I forget the name of their old general manager, Dave Ziegler, I believe. It was beyond frustrating to watch how they ran things, especially at the quarterback position.
Mm-hmm.
You're a former receiver. What'd you make of that whole situation?
Yeah, I think anytime you have a receiving core that's getting open and you have a quarterback that can't distribute the football, there's going to be a lot of frustration across the offense. Like offensive line, like, hey, like we're setting you up with time. We need you to deliver the ball. Running back, I'm taking these linebackers on, straight into my face to keep you protected. I need you to deliver the football. And then, yes, of course, your wide receivers, hey, we're getting open. We're running down the field. We're even on run plays, right? We're running our guy off and we can't get the football on a consistent basis. It just makes it really, really tough to play offense when you can't move the ball through the air. You become very one-dimensional. Like I said, that one dimension, that running game wasn't even very strong this year.
I thought you made a good point about not only literally in shape, but also his vision. The reps that Josh Jacobs didn't have in training camp to.
Yeah, huge.
It's true. It really affected their offense. And
Yeah, and I'll say this, before I played wide receiver, I also played running back before transitioning to wide receiver. And those first couple of days of camps, when you're starting to feel the flow of the defense, like until you see it happening in front of you a couple of times, and until you see the different defensive fronts that are matching up against your protection in your inside zone, your outside zone, until you start seeing that and feeling that, especially seeing and feeling the second level, it's going to be really, really hard for you to run the ball effectively. I think a lot of people slander DeAndre Swift for having bad vision. Like there's so many more yards that are available on the football field if you can just feel that second level and understand when it's time to cut it upfield, when it's time to hit that back door and get yourself out of some trouble, and when you just got to put your nose down and you got to put your head right into the hip of the guard and just go forward. And
yeah.
I think people underestimate that for these running backs that have, over the past couple of years, like been sitting out waiting for those contracts.
I said something. I said they would go 0-4. They started to start the year. They started 1-3, so I was pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
And then I called the Raiders the worst team in the AFC West, which I don't think was wrong. But it's really interesting. They finished second in their division. They finished ahead of Denver technically by a margin, and they finished ahead of the Chargers. And I think it really speaks to Antonio Pierce, the kind of the reigning hero, the interim coach who came in and went 5-4, and did. Antonio Pierce did a really good job. I think that's worth acknowledging. Is just that he took a bad situation, did the best he could. The players love him. I'm so glad they brought him back. I think that when you look around at the options, the Raiders could have brought in a head coach. For them to hire a new head coach would have, I don't know, once Jim Harbaugh was off the board, there weren't a lot of great options. Maybe Ben Johnson in Detroit, but he wasn't going to leave. So I think sticking with Antonio Pierce for at least one more year, seeing what you can do, keeping the players happy, building the culture, that was the right move to me. And I just really walked away with a lot of respect and admiration for Antonio Pierce, and his players seem to love him. And that just can't be denied.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that we saw from Antonio Pierce was an identity, that toughness and that grittiness that the Raiders fans love, that just win baby mentality. He's bringing that. Now, I honestly don't know a lot about his X's and O's. I don't know whether he's a defensive or offensive guy. So I'm curious,
He is.
how
So he played linebacker for the Giants.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what the staff is
Mm.
able to do on
Hmm.
his behalf, because a lot of the times, you got to have the right staff with you.
Mm.
I think that putting together a strong staff, especially as a rookie head coach or kind of a rookie head coach, is incredibly important who you surround yourself with. So I'm very interested to see the whole dichotomy of the team when it's a staff that he's put together, a roster that he's had a little bit more input in.
Can we dive into something you said?
Yeah.
Because I think I assumed you didn't know who Antonio Pierce is. So when you say don't know if he's offensive or defense, what do you mean by that? Like, because he's, from my understanding, he's a defensive coach. Like that's
Yeah.
how I view him.
You've got John Harbaugh, who's a special teams guy, who's a head coach. You've got your Sean McVays, and then you've got your D'Amico Ryans, right? Offensive and defensive, respectively. I wasn't sure what side of the ball Antonio Pierce was leaning to in terms of his expertise, if that makes sense.
No, I guess that's interesting.
Like,
I've
is
never
he going to
really.
be a walk around guy? Is it his desire to hone in more on the defense and then hand the keys to somebody on the offense? I'm just curious about how his staff is going to work together throughout the year and what role he wants to play for his team.
I always assumed defense just because he played defense, but he might even be a culture guy who, like, his job is just to set the
Yeah.
tone and then hire smart football people to run the X's and O's at the coordinator spot. He definitely, I get the sense minimum, he kind of reminds me of Dan Campbell actually in Detroit, where he's a former player, people love him, and he's just setting the tone. There's this energy, there's this culture he's creating that I don't know if it's going to work. Like, I don't know that the Raiders are going to be very good this year, but I think it's going to be fun. I think they're going to be interesting and entertaining, if nothing else. Like, the way they got Max Crosby, Gardner Minshew, they got players that really fit the Raiders persona, and then a
Yeah.
coach that also mirrors that. And that's interesting to me. I want to see that play out for another year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
I think it'd be criminal not to say this. We talked about Jimmy Garoppolo getting hurt. He got hurt, and then that led to him getting benched. And Aiden O'Connell, the rookie quarterback, came in and played in more games, but like massively outperformed him. Jimmy Garoppolo threw 7 touchdowns and had 9 interceptions in 7 games. Aiden O'Connell, 12 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, literally 1,000 yards more passing than Jimmy Garoppolo, and definitely not that many more games. I really thought Aiden O'Connell, I don't know that he's a franchise quarterback moving forward. I think there's going to be a battle between him and Minshew. They certainly paid Minshew to be their starting quarterback. That doesn't mean he will necessarily be the starting quarterback. But little tip of the cap, I thought Aiden O'Connell, to get drafted in the 4th round and play really, really well is not very common. I just said to come in and start basically the entire second half of the year, do fairly well is kind of interesting and very well done by him.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
He did just okay. I'm not willing to give him any of those flowers. I say this because I went to the Raiders Jets game in Las Vegas. I was down there for my birthday with my fiance, and I just didn't see anything. Granted, Jets have a solid defense. There wasn't a throw that he made where I was like, wow, like I could see him finding these consistencies. Anyway, we'll dive
Well,
into
no. Let's talk about this. I think it matters because I think you're right. I want to be clear. I'm not saying he had a great year, but he definitely defied expectations. He definitely did better than I thought. I didn't think he was going to hold it
in some
together.
football games.
He kept the life raft floating, and I was like, hey, that's like, you know what? That's better than I thought he would do. A rookie quarterback in the 4th round with no expectations at all. They won some games, and he was productive, and not a great quarterback, but certainly, I think you would agree he wasn't awful, and I think he was better than Jimmy Garoppolo. You still, that's hilarious.
No,
Maybe just how bad Jimmy Garoppolo was. I don't know. I thought he was better than Jimmy G.
I think it's a sliding scale for him, right? Awful based off of the situation that you were put into versus playing awfully. And I think he was in an awful situation. He was put into that awful situation, and I think that he made the most of it.
I know that there are Raiders fans who believe he's going to be their franchise quarterback and want him to be. I don't believe that.
No.
I think he was a Band-Aid. It's like putting duct tape on a broken pipe. Like, that's not a good long-term solution. Maybe Gardner Minshew is. I don't know that is the answer either. I think he's going to be a fun year, Gardner Minshew. I'm really curious what the Raiders quarterback situation looks like 2 years from now. And they're probably going to have to draft somebody. And ultimately, I even talked about this in my prediction. I think we still don't know who won the breakup, whether it was Derek Carr or the Raiders. And time's going to tell. We'll find out down the road, but it's still too early to call who won the breakup, in my opinion. I think right now, both of them lost, actually, because Josh McDaniels got fired. He sucked. Derek Carr didn't go to the playoffs with the Saints. So no one really won so far, in my opinion. What say you?
I think Derek Carr won. I think
Really?
Derek Carr is still sitting in a much better situation. He's getting paid. He's got great weapons, at his disposal in New Orleans. He'll be there for another year. And I think, I think Derek Carr won for sure.
Even is that just because Josh McDaniels got fired? Like McDaniels got rid of Carr and then got fired 8 games in?
I don't know that it's getting rid of McDaniels. I think it's getting out of Las Vegas and the turmoil that they're going to continue to have with impulsive decisions. I think you made a great point earlier. This Antonio Pierce decision feels like the most grounded one they've made with a clear direction forward. So hopefully that's an indication of this franchise, continuing to make those smart decisions. But currently, you go to the Saints, a storied organization in the NFL. They have a Super Bowl, and you've got Jimmy G there with Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed.
Rashid
I'm
Shaheed.
confusing him with something else.
No,
Yes,
it's Rashid Shaheed. No, it's a hard name to say. It's like it's a lot of heat going on.
Yeah, a lot of heat. And then Alvin Kamara, of course. So you got weapons like that. I think you're in good shape.
Let's talk about the 49ers. Here's what I said about the 49ers going into the 2023 season. I have the 49ers going 9-8 this fall. 9 wins, 8 losses. And I can already imagine the wave of angry emotion and energy coming at me from 49ers fans. I'm not trying to hate on Brock Purdy. I think I just don't know what he can do yet. 9 wins could be way, way off if Brock Purdy plays at a really high level. And it's worth acknowledging that in the 6 games he played at the end of the regular season last year, Brock Purdy threw 13 touchdown passes and 4 interceptions. Over 17 games, that rate would mean that he would throw 37 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. That's a really great season. And if that's what Brock Purdy does this fall, I'm going to be wildly inaccurate. 9-8 is going to be totally wrong. I acknowledge that. And maybe that's what he's going to do. But I think you have to acknowledge Brock Purdy is the number one question on this football team. Can he outperform and beat quarterbacks like Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, Kirk Cousins even? I think I'm not ready to say that yet. I think I'm not ready to say that Brock Purdy is going to win a quarterback duel against another really good quarterback. We'll see. I hope I'm wrong. I love Brock Purdy. He's a great story. And the dude seems locked in. As I listen to interviews and conversations he's having and a couple times in front of a microphone, the dude is all business. I really, really appreciate the intensity it appears that Brock Purdy's approaching this year with. He's really, really trying to take advantage of this opportunity he's been given to start in San Francisco. But I think when you really force me to make a decision, I'm just not sure what to expect from Brock Purdy. I was wrong about the 49ers.
Very wrong.
Well, I think
I'm disappointed.
Oh, man, I don't think I was ready for that clapback. I stand by what I said. I wasn't sure what to expect from Brock Purdy. And fair. I think the logic makes sense. And I even said I was very complimentary in my prediction. I said, look, if Brock Purdy, because he was on track for 37 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. He actually had 31 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. So he was pretty close to what I said he was on track for the year before. I said, look, if he has a year like that, this prediction is going to be wildly off. And it was, and I was. But I acknowledged, hey, if Brock Purdy's better than this, he's going to be great. I just didn't know what to expect from a kid who had I wasn't sure. Was that a fluke, the end of that first season, leading him to the NFC title game, or is he legit? And I think we learned in 2023, say what you want about Brock Purdy, he's a high-quality starting quarterback in the NFL. Is he top 5? That's nonsense, but he was a top 5 guy in passing yards in the NFL. That doesn't happen by accident. No matter how great your teammates are, no matter what goes on, he got to a Super Bowl. He's had 2 successful years in a row, threw him for a ton of yards. I think Brock Purdy's here to stay. I don't know what I would pay him. I think I'd still want to get him on a valuable, a nice value based contract, team friendly deal. But um, certainly he gained my respect this year, and I can stand by. Like I said going in, hey, 9-8 with the caveat that if Brock Purdy's better than I expect, they'll be better, and they were. What say you?
Yeah, I think you could have put Aiden O'Connell on that team and they would have had an incredible season as well. I don't think Aiden O'Connell probably throws for as many touchdowns, but I think looking at that roster to start the year, right? You got Christian McCaffrey, Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. That's an offensive cast that you can't find anywhere else in the league. And no matter what goes on, right? And then talk about an excellent defense as well. You've got Eric Armstead up front. You've got Nick Bosa. You've got Diamador Lenore. You lost Talanoa Hufanga, unfortunately, but you had an excellent defense, an excellent offense. Whoever's at quarterback, as we saw with Jimmy G, just needed to get the ball out of their hands. So I see where you were coming from with the prediction, and we can even add in talking about Brock Purdy's elbow. He did have to have that UCL surgery, which impacted his offseason. Adds
Mm-hmm.
even more question marks. Is he starting? Is Sam Darnold starting? We're not really sure. But I think that the core of that team was so fundamentally strong. You just needed somebody back there.
Do you think the 49ers would have been even better if they'd had, say, Baker Mayfield at quarterback or Derek Carr?
I'm not sure how much better, because I think the two guys that you brought up are in some way comparable to Brock Purdy in terms of their skill set. I think Brock Purdy has a little more maturity in terms of decision making. I think he's great at cutting it loose and knowing when not to cut it loose, especially when it comes to hanging those guys out to dry. And I think he has a little bit less ego than a guy like Baker Mayfield, who will sometimes try and squeeze that ball in that maybe he doesn't have the arm strength to do so. So I'm not quite sure how much better the Niners get with a Baker Mayfield or a Derek Carr. Maybe a game or two swing in either direction. But again, I just think those other pieces are so important and so valuable to that Niners team that the quarterback is complementary for that offense.
The 49ers are always fun because it makes me think of quarterbacks who maybe haven't had the support you would want them to have, like what Matthew Stafford was in the Lions. So that's why I bring up Derek Carr, because Derek Carr is a quarterback who we've never really seen with a ton of talent around him. Same with Baker Mayfield. I think you could argue that at least. Kirk Cousins, right, with the 49ers. Did they win a Super Bowl? Does he choke? Like, I'm genuinely wonder, like, is Brock Purdy maybe better than Kirk? Because I think Kirk really struggles at big moments, and Brock appears to be really chill and laid back and handle big moments very well. It's an interesting exercise, to think about. Like, hey, how good is Brock Purdy? Because when you start thinking about replacing him with other people, you go, well, I don't think they'd actually be better. It's kind of a fun. I mean, obviously with Josh Allen or Justin Herbert or Mahomes or something, they'd be better. But the other
Right.
guys, the lower tier, the guys who maybe haven't had the most success because of the support around them, it's a fun exercise. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. And I think that once you get outside of those top 5, 6 guys that, GMs are not taking calls on, I'm just not really sure how much better you get from a quarterbacking perspective. I'd even throw, Dak Prescott into the mix there along with Kirk Cousins. Yeah, great conversation and great, thought provoking question. But again, I think that offense is so, you know, quarterback friendly. It's run play, ball goes here. If ball's not going here, it's going there. And yes, you have to do a good amount of work at the line of scrimmage, right? You're getting 2 plays called into the huddle and you got to get the team in the best one. But outside of that, it's just get the ball to the guys who are going to deliver for you.
Some of the big matchups that I highlighted before the year were week 5 against Dallas,
Mm-hmm.
week 13 against Philly, and week 8 against the Cincinnati Bengals. Week 5, they trounced Dallas. It was a full team victory. They won 42-10. They beat Philly week 13, 42-19. They dominated. However, I thought, and I don't want to cherry pick things that make Brock Purdy look bad. That's not my intention. I thought Brock Purdy got outplayed by Joe Burrow week 8 in Santa Clara.
Oh yeah,
I really like.
we
I thought
thought
that
Joe
was
Burrow was back.
yeah, that was the one moment where it was like, we're really seeing, the difference between a truly like elite top 5 quarterback and compared to Brock Purdy. It was like, oh, this is the difference. This is a clear cut and dry example of like, oh, because other than that, they didn't really play an elite quarterback all year. Other than you could maybe argue maybe Stafford. That's it. I wouldn't put Kirk in that conversation. I wouldn't put Dak Prescott in that conversation. I would put Kyler Murray in that conversation. Geno Smith, Jalen Hurts. The only guy they played in 2023 that made me go, oh, that's a top 5 quarterback was Joe Burrow, and they got exposed a little bit. At least I thought Brock Purdy did when you compare them head to head. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that they caught the Bengals as they were starting to hit a stride. We know that Joe Burrow, had that calf injury that was kind of hampering his start to the season.
Yeah,
And I think once it reached that time, what was that, like week 7 or 8?
week 8, yeah.
Week 8, yeah, you started to see Joe Burrow and that offense really start to find their stride. That mix of the run game, screen game, quick game, as well as getting the ball to Jamar Chase. So yeah, I think they just kind of ran into a buzzsaw there that maybe they weren't expecting. And then Trey Hendrickson and what's his name, Hubbard, on those outsides for the Bengals, they just harass you all game. And I think that's one of the first times that we saw Brock Purdy like truly be unsettled in the pocket. And I believe that was also part of that 3-game stretch where they also played the Browns, and I'm missing somebody else in
Minnesota.
there. Minnesota, right? That 3-game stretch where they lost. And I believe that there were some injuries to the team as well. I know that Deebo Samuel missed some time. Christian McCaffrey was dinged up a little bit. I know Trent Williams was out for a couple of games. So when we needed Brock to elevate the team, not that it materially changed the rest of the season, but we saw that when he needed to elevate the team beyond being a distributor, it wasn't quite there. And I know that he got them in field goal position and Moody missed the kick, but that doesn't erase a full game against the Browns. Again, who also have a great defense. That doesn't erase a whole game of just not getting it done. And we all have stinkers, but he essentially had 3 in a row.
Yeah, and we saw without Deebo Samuel, like the offense wasn't the same. And I think there's a conversation worth having. Going into the year, I was like, oh, this is going to be a tough year. I had 9-8 as my prediction, but as you look at their schedule, I actually kind of wonder, like, was the schedule just not as tough as maybe I would have thought? They played Pittsburgh, who wasn't as good as we thought. The Giants, Arizona, Dallas, Cleveland, Minnesota, the Jaguars, Tampa, Seattle, Philly, the Ravens, Washington. Like, there's only one real Super Bowl contender in that list. Maybe Philadelphia, the Bengals, and the Cowboys, and that's it. And they handled the Cowboys because the Cowboys have their own limitations and problems. Wasn't
Yeah,
that
they do.
blown away by it? When you look back at their schedule, you go, oh, like, they kind of didn't really get challenged much. Some of that's because they're an incredible football team. Some of that's because I wish we could have had a matchup against the Ravens or against Kansas City or someone that would really put them in a tough spot. And we just didn't see that. They didn't play Detroit until the NFC title game. I would have loved to see that kind of matchup, but they didn't play anyone that great until they got to the playoffs.
I mean, if you remember, they played the Ravens late in the season, and they were driving. It was two. It was like two of their 3 opening drives. They had these really bad turnovers after they were marching the football down the field. They ended up losing probably 30 some odd to probably like 17 or 19 or something like that.
33-19. I'm looking at it right now.
There it is. That game could have looked totally different had they have scored on those drives. But also, again, you kind of run into that stiffer, grittier AFC North team, and we kind of saw what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm disappointed we never got to see Sam Darnold really play in a meaningful game. I was hoping, like, I don't know, that's not how I mean that, but I wondered if Brock Purdy got hurt, what would Sam Darnold look like? It was a fun test case. When they're trying to win, they're playing with Deebo Samuel. I wanted to see Sam Darnold play with, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. It would have given us a really good read on, like, hey, how good is Purdy? How much is it the people around him, and how much of it is Brock Purdy? We know for a fact in training camp in Minnesota, Sam Darnold is wheeling and dealing right now. He's dropping dimes to Justin Jefferson. And so I don't know. I'm disappointed we never got to see that possibly play out. That world of Sam Darnold playing in a meaningful game for the 49ers. He played week 18 in the rest your starters bowl against the
Mm-hmm.
Rams with Carson Wentz and Sam Darnold. Like, that's not a fun game. That's not what I
Epic,
mean. I mean, like,
epic showdown. How
yeah, it's like,
crazy does that matchup sound? Like 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago.
yeah, Wentz and Sam Darnold with the Rams and the Niners. If you told me that 5 years ago, I would have been like, how did that even
That'd have been
happen?
crazy. Yeah.
Um, I do want to talk about your receiver guy. Brandon Ayuk was their leading receiver at 75 catches,
Mm-hmm.
1,342 yards, 7 touchdown catches. What do you make of Brandon Ayuk? Talk to me about him, because he's often overshadowed by Kittle and McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel, and I think that's part of the situation right now. He wants out, but some of that's because I think he doesn't get the attention maybe he deserves when he was their actual leading receiver. He actually is the guy making the most plays downfield. What do you make of that situation with, 4 playmakers basically all trying to share attention and the ball?
Yeah, he's the best true receiver on that roster, far and away. His ability to get in and out of breaks, he's physical at the point of catch, which is incredibly important and huge for Brock, right? He can kind of throw some 50-50 balls up, which are more like a 95-5 for a guy like Brandon Ayuk. The issue I'm currently taking with Brandon Ayuk is him wanting top box office money, right? The Tyreek Hill, the Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Justin Jefferson. And I get that the numbers are somewhat comparable. I just don't think that if I'm the Niners, that's the guy that I want to pay. I mean, because you have to divvy the money up. And I don't want to compare this to, like the Splash Brothers and Draymond Green in Golden State. But if there's a guy that was left out, it was Kevin Durant. And I think that you've got, Debo, Kittle, and McCaffrey, those offensive skill weapons. And Ayuk kind of sits on the outside of that grouping. I think that the team can be similar in terms of production without Brandon Ayuk. But if you were to take, say, Debo Samuel out of that, then I think the offense looks a little bit different. And I think we saw a little bit of that, in this previous year. Again, he's got all the measures and marks of being an elite wide receiver in the National Football League. I think he's benefited from being in that Kyle Shanahan system where he is often schemed open. I think $20 million a year is what I would personally pay Brandon Ayuk if I'm the Niners, right? If I'm somebody else and I've got a ton of cap room, maybe it's not as big of a deal to give him 28 to 30. I see where John Lynch and Shanahan and the Niners are coming from. Like, hey, I just think you might be that guy that's just on the outside looking in terms of the guys that we want to pay.
Is that partially because he's the least unique of that group? Like, there's no other Deebo Samuel. There's no other Christian McCaffrey, running back, who can catch balls out of the backfield. McCaffrey had over 2,000 yards from scrimmage last year, 1,400 rushing and another, but basically 600 receiving. And George Kittle can block and run routes. The most basic skill set of those 4 guys is Brandon Ayuk, just a true receiver. Where Deebo Samuel's a running back and a receiver. McCaffrey's can catch passes and play running back. Kittle's a tight end who blocks, can run the ball sometimes, can catch passes. Brandon Ayuk can really only catch passes. Is that part of it? Is that he's just got one basic skill set and doesn't have the versatility the other guys have? Like, he's more replaceable, maybe, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I think with how you framed it up, yes, he may be a little bit more replaceable. I will give him his flowers as a perimeter blocker. He is a monster out there. So you talk about throwing those bubble screens to McCaffrey and Debo. Like, those don't go for, 10, 15, 30 yards if he's not absolutely eating up corners and safeties. So let's tip the cap to Ayuk there. That's on top of his ability. But yeah, I think maybe he is a little bit less unique and maybe not maybe Lynch feels like he's more replaceable because you can get traits close enough to Ayuk to service what you need versus you're not finding another C-Mac out there or something even close. You're not finding a Debo out there or something even close. And you're certainly not finding a football loving psycho like George Kittle anywhere else. But a wide receiver who can get to where they need to go and be where they need to be, I feel like they think they may have a better chance at finding that, whether that's in the draft or free agency, than, again, paying him top of the market money. It's just, I think it's more of an unfortunate circumstance that both parties are in than it is, ill will towards one another or not seeing the value that the other has. I think the Niners certainly recognize his value, but I think that maybe their hands are just tied. I don't know. That's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I normally in the past would have said maybe, hey, like recognize the position you're in. You got a great team around you, can win a lot. But I don't think of that way anymore, man. I really think you've got such a brief window of time to make your generational wealth. And you live in the Bay Area, like how brutal California taxes are.
It's expensive.
Like, man,
expensive.
If Brandon Ayuk got paid $30 million in the state of Florida or Tennessee or Washington, Texas, like that dude is making so much more money than by taking a team-friendly deal in California, where you're not only getting hit by taxes, but you're also taking less money because you got to pay your teammates. And how many millions is that costing? I truly that's a big chunk of change to be taking a team-friendly deal in California rather than being selfish and getting yours in like Florida or Tennessee or wherever, a tax, an income-free, a state that doesn't do income tax, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Maybe Tennessee's the spot. Like that's a team that's not in the NFC. You trade him there. They've got a bunch of salary cap. They got a young quarterback. Like they could use him for sure. That's a place with no state income tax. I think that's like an underrated thing that no one's talking about is what if you did this? Would you trade Stephon Diggs straight up for Brandon Ayuk?
What
Houston.
team am I?
Houston.
If I'm Houston?
Yeah.
No. I got Stephon Diggs.
You'd rather have Stephon Diggs?
100% of the time.
What about Diggs
Stephon
and a
Diggs.
first for Brandon Ayuk?
If somebody's giving me Diggs and a first for Brandon Ayuk, you would be ridiculous not to take
No.
that.
It's Brandon Ayuk and a first for Diggs.
If I'm Houston, 100%.
So what about
you toss in a first round wide receiver? I mean, not a first round wide receiver.
A first round pick.
You throw in a first round pick.
Now, mind you, it's going to be like the 30th pick because the 49ers are super good.
That's fine because of the talent for wide receivers that's coming out right now. Plus, that may not end up being a need because you've already got Tank Dell, Nico Collins, and Brandon Ayuk. You don't need a receiver, but having an additional first round pick would be huge.
Yeah, and you get that 5th-year option.
Yeah, very, very fictitious, sort of deal. And I'm not sure what Diggs
Houston would never do that.
No, and I'm not sure what Diggs could even command, on the trade market, given his age and his desire to have the football frequently.
His ego, you're trying to say. Let's talk about Seattle. Here's what I said about the Seattle Seahawks going into the 2023 season. I do think Seattle's going to go 9-8 this year. That's the same record as last year. I know that's going to infuriate Seattle fans. However, as you look around the NFL, there's just so many loaded football teams. There's only so many wins to go around, and they got a tough schedule. There's a 4-game stretch where Seattle goes through an insane gauntlet of, the best teams and the best pass rushes in the NFC. Week 12, Seattle plays the 49ers in Seattle. Then week 13, they play at Dallas. That's another great pass rush. Week 14, they play the 49ers again, this time on the road in San Francisco. And then week 15, they play Philly. That's, those 3 teams, 49ers twice, Philly and Dallas are the best pass rushes, in the entire NFL. The best teams at getting after the quarterback are going to be playing Seattle 4 weeks in a row. That's not great with a young, inexperienced offensive line. Now, that gauntlet doesn't start till week 12. That's enough time for Abraham Lucas and Charles Cross to really get even better. But it's brutal, man. It's a really tough stretch of games that they might go 0-4 in. I am really interested to see what happens with defensive end Draymond Jones. Seattle just gave him a new contract that felt like a vote of confidence. He had 6.5 sacks last year. That's interesting, but they must feel like he's doing some really good stuff in camp. They gave him a contract extension, and I'm curious to see what he does this fall. You know, the Seattle Seahawks are a better team than they were last year, in my opinion. I think they could win the NFC West. If Brock Purdy isn't amazing in San Francisco, I see a really great opportunity for the Seattle Seahawks to win that division and kind of run away with it. And I love the position Seattle's in with their roster. They've got a really great blend of young, talented guys mixed with stud veterans. It's just an awesome roster top to bottom with a lot of youth, a lot of good veterans. I feel great about this year, and I feel great about the future in Seattle. I do wonder how long Pete Carroll is going to be the head coach in Seattle. He's been there since 2010. He's 71. He's the oldest coach in the NFL, oldest head coach. Dude, I absolutely nailed this one. I said they'd go 9-8. They did go 9-8. I talked about Pete Carroll. How long is he going to stay in Seattle? He left at the end of the year. I don't think I could have made this any better. I was exactly spot on. It's one of the last ones I'm really spot on with, but I nailed the Seahawks prediction. Would you agree?
I think you nailed the prediction in terms of record. I think a few other things, as far as like the draft went, like JSN and Witherspoon, I think they kind of ended up being a little bit disappointing as a whole. But I think the overall kind of theme of just question marks kind of around the board, surrounding Pete. How does Geno look kind of in this second year? Can he back it up? Can a Seattle running back stay healthy? You've moved off of a lot of guys defensively. How does that team look as you start to build kind of around Tariq Woolen? It was just a big question mark season, and I think that led to a lot of question mark results, which is what gets you to, in and around 500.
Jamal Adams is out. Quandre Diggs is out. They paid Draymond Jones a ton of money. They gave him a big, not a massive contract, but a decent contract. Dude had 4.5 sacks last year. Like, why did we pay him? What are we doing? He was 9th on their team in tackles. I don't know why they gave him that contract. That made no sense to me. I think they were hoping, maybe trying to hedge their bets and pay him before he had a takeoff year, but they paid him as if he was going to have a breakout year, and he didn't. And you're like, why did we give this guy? I don't know. Let me find the number. What did they pay Draymond Jones? It was ridiculous. Draymond Jones contract. They paid him a 3-year, $51.5 million contract. It's not insane. Like it's not $100 million, but certainly that's more than his production would command.
4 sacks. A lot of money for 4 sacks.
Oh yeah. And we've been waiting. I'm not a Seahawks fan, but we live in the Northwest. At least we grew up there, and I live there now. I've been waiting for Seattle to get a pass rusher for like years and years, and they just never can. And I thought maybe Draymond Jones, hey, they see something in him. They're going to pay him. It's going to lead to this big production. What?
Was Cliff Averill their last good pass rusher?
I think so. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Goodness gracious.
Or what's the one of the brothers? He played for the Patriots too after that.
Bennett, one of the Bennett brothers?
Yeah, not Martellus Bennett.
Not Anthony Bennett.
Oh, I guess it would be Martellus Bennett. Is that who? Bennett.
Michael Bennett. I think Michael was Bennett. The tight end.
Michael Bennett. Michael Bennett was probably their best pass rusher in like forever. You know that there's a Michael Bennett who's also a U.S. senator. I did not know that. But no, that's the last great pass rusher. It's probably Michael Bennett, and it's been years,
7, 8 years since. Yeah. So not great.
Yeah, they cannot get after the quarterback. I thought that there was an interesting stretch at the end of the year that deserves credit for Seattle. They played the 49ers, Dallas, the 49ers again, and Philly, weeks 12, 13, 14, and 15. I'm going to pull it up. I believe they went 3-1 in that stretch, which to me is like, I don't know how that happened. I remember saying like, that's going to be a really tough part of their year. No, sorry. They lost. They went 1-3. So they lost 4 in a row, week 11, 12, 13, and 14. They lost to the Rams, the 49ers twice, and Dallas. And in their tough stretch of games, they went 1-3. That blew up their season. They were 6-3 going in, and they were 6-7 leaving that 4-game slide. And that ruined their season, man. They couldn't hang with the best and brightest the NFL has to offer. The Cowboys, the 49ers, and the Rams.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's not a shock to me. Pete Carroll was, I think, fired, and they just let him. They had the courtesy of parting ways, is how they phrased it. But his voice they were tired of his voice in that locker room, I would believe. And I coach with someone who played for Pete Carroll. Literally, I see him every day. He loves Pete. And not very many people are going to say anything bad about Pete Carroll, but it wore thin, is how it came across from the outside.
Yeah, eventually everybody's time is up, and it doesn't matter how great you've done, how many Super Bowl appearances and/or wins you've had for a team. It's just sometimes your time is up. We saw that with Andy Reid in Philly, and he was able to go, move on to a second location in Kansas City and kind of, repeat some success. But yeah, every once in a while, just what you're trying to communicate loses touch with the guys in the locker room, with the rest of the front office, and once your quarterback is not right, like those last 2 years with Russ, and then we've got Geno for the last 2 years, like things just get really muddy when you don't have an elite quarterback. An elite quarterback is such a band-aid for so many problems that the team has. And when you're missing that, I think it amplifies, that it amplifies the tiredness that people feel from the voice, right? Because if you can't deliver the football, you can't score points. You can only be the rah-rah guy, the let's compete, let's go out and give our best so long before it's, hey, we're busting our ass, but we're just not getting results.
Can we talk about the receiving core? Because they got Tyler Lockett, who's 31 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be 32 in September. They've got DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think I've always talked about them as a great receiving core, but when you really break it down, like Tyler Lockett's 32, basically. DK Metcalf isn't very good unless he's running a slant hitch or a fade. Jackson Smith-Njigba is young and maybe has time to blossom, but I'm getting concerned that maybe this is a bit of an overrated group at receiver in Seattle. You're a receiver guy. You played in at the D1 level. What do you make of this receiver room in Seattle?
I don't think overrated is the word. I think perhaps misused or underutilized, perhaps. I think that there's more ways to line up Jackson Smith-Njigba than just in the slot. I think that there's more ways to line up DK Metcalf as more than just like your backside X. I think that there's more ways to use Tyler Lockett than those, late deep balls over the middle, right? And I think that those, like if you were to run like Seattle Seahawks highlights through your brain, right? You like those are the kind of plays that you see. It's DK over the top or it's a DK slant. Like I was just saying, the same for Tyler Lockett and what we saw from Jackson Smith-Njigba. Part of being a receiver is being able to play multiple positions. Now, maybe they can't, maybe I don't know that. But if I'm an offensive coordinator, I am working all week to make sure that I can maximize every single matchup on the field. I'm using motion, I'm using different formations, and I'm putting guys maybe where they're not typically at to give the defense a different look and give them a different focus, give them some eye candy to set up, to set up your wide receivers. So I'm not willing to say overrated quite yet, and I'm interested to see how this year goes with is it McDonald? McDonald's the head coach with the
Yep,
Seahawks
Mike
now.
McDonald. Yep.
Yep, and he came from the Ravens. Very run heavy. You've got Zach Charbonnet as well as Kenneth Walker. I expect to see a lot of play action. Sorry, I'm getting into next year's talk a little bit, but
That's okay.
not willing to say overrated yet for those guys. I'm saying they were underutilized.
Well, the interesting thing here is Ryan Grubb is going to be the offensive coordinator in Seattle, who was the offensive coordinator at Washington previously.
Mm-hmm.
What he did at Washington, you and I have literally talked about this before. He took advantage of, we got great receivers, let's have great matchups outside. And I'm wondering, this will be really the true test of both Ryan Grubb as a coach, but as this receiving core, I would imagine he's going to find ways to use them properly. He's going to give them great matchups, move them all over the field. Now it's up to these three receivers to really figure it out. And, Jackson Smith and Jigba,
He'll be the leading receiver next year for them, guaranteed.
you think so? He had 63 catches, 620 yards, 4 touchdowns. He was the third leading receiver last year behind only Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. You think he's going to have a breakout year and surpass both of them this year?
I think so. I mean, 63 catches for only 600 some odd yards is a pretty low yards per catch, which tells you how they were using him. Very poor depth, and I think that's going to change. Number one, because he's got incredible speed. He's great tracking the ball in the air. I think that he is a more of a weapon to line up in different places, both outside and inside, than Lockett and DK are. And I think that Ryan Grubb is just licking his chops.
Nathan, here's what I said about the LA Rams going into the 2023 season.
Whoo.
The LA Rams kept their three best players, quarterback Matthew Stafford, receiver Cooper Kupp, and defensive tackle Aaron Donald. Although, honestly, I'm not sure why. I don't know why they didn't fully commit to tanking. It doesn't really make sense to me. I believe the Rams really did try to trade Matthew Stafford this offseason. They made a few calls, but nobody wanted that crazy contract. Last year, all three of these players got hurt and missed a lot of games. Aaron Donald only played in 11 games. Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford only played in 9. It was an ugly year, but it was ugly even before they got hurt. And this offseason, they traded away star corner Jalen Ramsey. And when that happened, I thought that was going to trigger them fully tearing down their football team and rebuilding. Because financially, the Rams are still literally paying for the Super Bowl they won. They went all in to get to that Super Bowl and win. I think it was worth it, in my opinion. But the result is that the Rams have $72 million of dead cap space, meaning that they are paying guys who are no longer on their football team a ton of money this year. Now, I love the Rams head coach, Sean McVay. Well, he's not going anywhere. He's not on the hot seat. If they're terrible this year, it's totally fine. I think it's understandable. Again, they're paying for their sins. They're paying the price of going all in and spending a ton of money to win a Super Bowl 2 years ago. Outside of their big three, the Rams just aren't very good. I think this team wins like 4 games maximum. They play Arizona twice. They play at Indy week 4. Those are good opportunities to win. But I have the Rams going 2-15 this year. And I know that sounds crazy. Like, wow, like they've got good players. They got 3 of them. But I think there's going to be a point where the Rams realize that winning doesn't help us. Winning, in fact, actually is going to be antithetical to what the Rams are going to try to do long term, which is build another Super Bowl team. And the minute they realize, hey, losing gets us potentially the first overall pick, And if the Rams kind of smell blood in the water and go, hey, we might be able to draft Caleb Williams, the hero quarterback at USC, that would be amazing. So I have the Rams going 2-15 this year. I think they could be sellers at the trade deadline. I could see them trading away Aaron Donald. I could see them trading away Cooper Kupp. Maybe Cooper Kupp goes to Detroit. Maybe I think that the Rams could make literally like baseball trades where they send off their best players to teams that are Super Bowl contenders for first-round draft picks and then really heavily rebuild. If the Rams can get, a first-round pick for Aaron Donald or Cooper Kupp and then have 3 first-round picks next year and really rebuild their football team, that would be huge. So I think losing is actually good for the Rams this year. And I was surprised they didn't go all in on tanking.
Dude, I was so wrong. I was so far off, and I'll eat it, man. I said 4 wins max. I thought they were going to go 2-15. They went 10-7, ended up second in their division. It was frankly, round of applause to Sean McVay, to everyone there. Really, Les Snead deserves a ton of credit. The GM to find Kyron Williams and Puka Nacua in the 5th round. Both of them are 5th round players who were incredible. Kyron Williams ran for over 1,000 yards. Puka Nacua had 105 catches for 1,486 yards and 6 touchdowns. I mean, the production they got out of young players was unbelievable. And I thought they were tanking. I was suggesting, I was literally like, why are they not tanking? Why are they not trading Aaron Donald? Why are they not? I talked about them maybe at the trade deadline being like a baseball team, selling everyone off to try to get draft picks. And they were so much better than I thought. What do you make of what I said, and what do you make of the Rams season last year? I was honestly pretty shocked about the low win total that you had for them. I didn't expect them to be a playoff team. just because anytime you're trying to trade your starting quarterback because he won't, renegotiate his contract, that just to me says all kinds of bad news is about to come offensively and have that trickle down to the rest of the team. All of that changes. Obviously, you get into training camp and Stafford's like, oh, I got Puka and I got Cup. Like, this is about to be crazy. And then you've got Kyron Williams, making this surgence after that kind of, you know, dismiss Cam Akers, if you will. I think that there ended up being this perfect storm of, hey, like we can work this out and do this together. I think that because you had Matt Stafford and you have really a relatively young team around him, I think he was kind of feeding off that young energy and that juice. And it was just kind of like a fresh start. I felt like they didn't necessarily have any incredible expectations on there. Like you mentioned, like you had a low win total. I think quite a few other people didn't expect them to have a high win total either. So to see them excel the way they did, especially on the offensive side of the ball, uh, just really exciting. And yeah, tip the cap to Sean McVay.
I wonder if the expectations actually helped them. Like they had $72 million in dead cap. They were paying $72 million to people that were not on their roster. Like I was like,
Right.
there's no way this team is going to win. And they rebuilt their team with rookie contracts, paying young guys very little money, and reset everything. It's just I wonder if Sean McVay's mentality, because he had nothing to lose. He wasn't on the hot seat. I think
Mm-hmm.
they could have won 2 games last year, and Sean McVay would have got fired, and they would have been very comfortable with that. For him to
Mm-hmm.
go 10-7 with what he had and to develop the players the way he did, I almost feel like it. I look, part of this is because I set the expectations too low, right? I was off, but I also really think it's worth a conversation. Like, this is an incredible coaching job by Sean McVay to take the young guys they had and develop them the way they did and bring it all together. Um, Again, maybe some of this is me coping with this horrible prediction I made, but I really think this is an incredible coaching job. Would you agree?
I think so too, and we'd be remiss not to mention the fact that they're a player or two away from being in the NFC divisional game,
Yeah.
right? Is it divisional or
Yeah,
was it the
they
NFC
lost
championship?
24 to
They lost to the
23.
Lions.
They lost in
Yeah,
the wild card round 24 to 23 to the Lions. Like, they're a
yeah,
point away from tying that game up. I mean, man, like, it came down to a field goal at the end, basically. And
yeah,
they had the ball. They punted. The Rams punted the ball away with 4 minutes and 7 seconds left in the fourth quarter. They never got the ball back. I mean,
yeah.
man, like, if they
Brutal.
go for it in that situation, it was 4th and 14. They had to punt it away. So I get why they didn't. But man, like, really this came down to a penalty holding. They had 3rd and 4, and it would have been 4th and 4, but a holding penalty pulled it back to 3rd and 14 and then 4th and 14. That holding penalty
Yeah,
is the season, but it's a 1-point game on that drive. I mean, man, like, it was so close. And
yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's just as far as that the expectations weren't incredibly high, but they got hot and really started to find their stride and find that juice and find that confidence. And I think that's what propelled them to have such a strong finish to the season, despite some in and outness from Matt Stafford too. He battled a couple of injuries, I believe, midway through the season, and to be able to make it through that, you got to feel pretty good about your chances next year. Now there's a target.
when they had other people too, Kobe Turner, Byron Young, Darius Williams, Tre'Davious White. Like, I guess Tre'Davious White's a veteran. Jared Verse, though, I think Jared Verse is a rookie. I'm trying to remember. They
Jared
just
Verse,
drafted
yeah,
him.
just drafted out of Florida State.
But the roster is full of young talent, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Tre'Davious White's a veteran. But the other guys I mentioned these are young, talented players on the defensive side of the football. Add to that Puka Nacua, Steve Avila, um, Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams. It's so Tutu Atwell. Like, there's so many young players that are up and coming, and it's this weird mix of, you got Matthew Stafford, you got Cooper Kupp, and then a bunch of young guys basically left behind him. And
And you got Blake Corum. Don't forget about the addition of Blake Corum for this year.
that's right. Well, they're stacked at running back, dude. That's crazy. I mean, that really. When did they draft? Was he a 2nd-round pick? I missed that somehow. 3rd-round pick. Okay,
Third round.
that's crazy. They don't even need him, but they're gonna have a good fun 1-2 punch at running back.
And I believe they have Boston Scott as well. So even, he's proven that he can tote the rock there when he was in Philly. If he gets some meaningful touches, he'll be a
They
return specialist
do.
guy. Like, they've, and Boston Scott's another guy who's been around and knows what a winning culture looks like. Anytime you can marry the veterans who have won and know what it takes to win with the young guys who are trying to find their way, it's a beautiful marriage, and that's how you get the most out of your team.
Yeah, Boston Scott is like a culture guy in that locker room. On top
Big
of like he's
vibes.
your third string running back, but he's a veteran leader is really what he's probably the role he will play. I don't know, man. Again, tip of the cap to Sean McVay. What a good season, and boy was I wrong. I can own that. I was way off, and
I think a lot of people were. And again, like they moved off guys like Jalen Ramsey. Yeah, like it's just it was impressive.
I don't have a lot to say about the Arizona Cardinals. I'll play the clip. Here's what I said about the Cardinals going into the 2023 season, and then we can talk about how it went down. I believe the Arizona Cardinals have the worst football team in the NFL. I'm not sure they've got a quarterback. Their quarterback, Kyler Murray, is recovering from an ACL tear, and Kyler says he wants to be back in time for week 1. I'm not sure that's really a realistic timeline. I'm not a doctor, but we'll see. I feel bad for the Cardinals' new head coach, Jonathan Gannon. I think what happened was no one wanted the job, and he's kind of the only sucker willing to become the head coach of the Cardinals. No one wanted to take that job. They're a poorly run football team with a huge question at quarterback. They had to get rid of their star receiver, DeAndre Hopkins. It's not great. They've got a goofball head coach, Jonathan Gannon. There's some videos of him that are really cringy on the internet where I'm like, it's going to be an ugly year in Arizona. I feel bad for Cardinals fans. I think teams like, Chicago, Houston, and Washington, teams that are not doing well that need a win, are going to be really grateful when they play Arizona. And so I've got, the Cardinals are going to go 1-16. I wouldn't commit to going 0-17. That's just not. I'm sure they'll win a game here or there. Maybe they win 2. Like, maybe they find a way. But to me, the Arizona Cardinals are the worst team in football, and that is why I have them going 1-16.
Yeah, they just not a good ball club, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's interesting to talk about them. I said they were the worst team in the NFL, and I don't know that that's actually true. I think Carolina probably was. In fact, they were. That's why they had the number 1 pick. But it's not like Arizona had this great season. I predicted they would go 1-16. They went 4-13 instead. Like, whoa, 3 more wins than you thought. They had the 4th pick in the draft. Let's not act like they had some incredible year. I don't know. I've really only got one thing to say. So Kyler Murray didn't play until week 10. It's pretty tough to not have your starting quarterback for the first 9 weeks of the year.
Totally.
But the really big sticking point to me about this season is Zaven Collins, a guy who was a first-round pick in 2021, expected to be a pass rusher. In 50 games, this guy has 5.5 sacks. 50 games, he's got 5.5 sacks. That's a sack every 9 games, if you're keeping track. Horrifying. He had 3.5 sacks this year. He's just disappointing. And even with a new head coach that's got a defensive mind, they're still not getting the best out of Zaven Collins. He's a bust. He's like maybe the 3rd worst bust, in that draft class. It's horrifying.
I mean, I'm willing to give him another year or 2 just because you had a guy like Solomon Thomas who went to the Niners, didn't really play very well. And then now he's a core piece of that Jets D-line now. So a few guys, sometimes it takes a little bit to grow into what being a league pass rusher means. So I'm willing to give him one more year. The organization isn't very good. It's hard to be successful when everything else around you is failing. Just ask Kellen Moore and Justin Herbert. So I'm willing to give him a little bit of a grace, given that he kind of walked into a pretty ugly situation.
Well, and it makes you wonder. He's truly like an outside backer, and so I wonder how. I wonder if him in a different system would be helpful to him on a different team, putting him in a different spot, basically.
Yeah.
I think that's a wise take, which is to not hate the player, but ask questions like, "Hey, is this guy being put in the right spot?" Basically,
Right. Yeah, and then you see coaches, a guy like Dan Quinn, who in the preseason was playing Micah Parsons off the ball, a little bit of middle linebacker, outside backer, dropping into coverage. There's that famous clip of Parsons getting all kinds of turned around, and he's like, "Okay, never mind, Parsons. I'm just going to have you rush the passer like a maniac, down in and down out." And that's what it takes, as a defensive coordinator and just as a coach in general. You got to figure out how to give your guys, like Dan Campbell says, the best possible advantage. I swear that's all I think about. That's what you got to do, is you got to set your guys up for success. But yeah, just the rest of the Cardinals roster. I think you mentioned it earlier. Gannon got kind of a trap job. He took a job that nobody wanted. There's not a lot of talent on the roster. Not really a lot of picks to like rebuild that roster in short order. You've got an injured, somewhat moody quarterback in Kyler Murray. He doesn't have any weapons, although they just drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. Hollywood Brown injured, Rondale Moore injured. James Conner could be solid at times, but didn't necessarily have breakaways. Like it wasn't a good team. Arguably a worse roster than the Raiders had.
The one moment, like the one thing we got to talk about is Josh Dobbs had this kind of moment with the Cardinals earlier last year. And the one win they had without Kyler Murray was Josh Dobbs week 3 in Arizona. They beat the Cowboys 28-16, which I find so hilarious and fun. I'm not a Cowboys fan, and anytime I watch the Cowboys lose an embarrassing game, it's fun for me. Week 3, the Cowboys lost to the Cardinals. Their only win in the first 9 weeks. It started 1-8. That one win was over the Cowboys, and then 2 weeks later, the Cowboys got their asses kicked by the 49ers in Santa Clara. And I just enjoy anytime the Cowboys lose badly. I do genuinely find joy in that. But I remember that win where we're like, did Josh Dobbs just do that? And it was kind of a fluky, fun moment, but it was still really cool to see. If you're a Cardinals fan, I would imagine that's like the highlight of the year was that game, winning that way, that moment, that brief period of Josh Dobbs. It's like the only thing you live for, probably, if you're a Cardinals fan last year.
Yeah, I think so. And I will give Gannon this. There's that funny clip of him, talking about like, you ready to go? You guys, you got the fire in your belly. I think he got that team to play pretty hard by the end of the season. And although it was clear that they were kind of committed to tanking, I thought it was great to see guys play hard and play physical, even through that last game of the year. They barely lose to the Seahawks. Let's see. They actually end up beating the Eagles. You kind of have a weird game against the Bears, beat badly by the 49ers. You beat the Steelers. They played hard, and I can appreciate when a team has an identity like that.
Yeah, what were they? 4-5? Yeah, 4-5 with Kyler Murray healthy. And that says something. Yeah. Or 3-5, I guess. 3-5 with Kyler Murray healthy. I think this is the most positive I've ever felt after a 4-13 season, which is very weird to say, but to not have your quarterback for 9 games, which it's hard to judge half your season when you don't have your starting quarterback. The second half of the year, you go 3-5, and really, again, like you said, your team is in games. They had a close game against Houston, a playoff team. They beat Philly. They beat Pittsburgh. They barely lose to Seattle. They have a close game, within a score or two of Chicago. They're in games. They were fighting. They were close. They beat Atlanta. Like I think that this was a year of progress for the Cardinals, even if it's not a year we'll ever remember. I'm really glad they didn't fire Jonathan Gannon. I thought it was a year in the right direction, and it made me wonder, hey, what's the future for the Cardinals? What's the future for Jonathan Gannon? Because, like you said, I mean, this team showed up with their best a lot of the time, especially at the end of the year. And I've never felt so encouraged after a 4-13 season the way I do about this. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree on that. Gannon, I think, has probably 2 more years or a year and a half, a year and Thanksgiving, we'll call it. And we'll see what this offense looks like with, Kyler Murray and with Marvin Harrison, and see how that defense starts to round itself out in their second year with his regime.
He gained my respect, because you're right. That clip of him, he's very nerdy. He's like, do you have the fire in your belly? Like it's like the
hard,
most.
It's hard to come back from some stuff
dude,
like that.
It's the least motivating clip of a coach we saw all off season last year. It was just like, oh God, that's your coach? This is the fucking guy? Really? This is the guy you're trotting out on Sundays?
It
And for
was
him to
giving
overcome that and us to walk away to now be going into the next season, like, I respect him. That's pretty crazy.
it was giving Adam Gase vibes though.
Oh
Like
yeah.
that's really what it was.
The Adderall eyes. Before we go, I do want to say I've been watching my girlfriend Molly. She watched the Giants Hard Knocks to me, the offseason Hard Knocks. And that sent her spiraling out of control. She's watched now all of Jets Hard Knocks from last year, all of the Dolphins Hard Knocks from last year as well. I come home from work and she's like watching the end of Miami Dolphins Hard Knocks. And I'm like, did you watch this by yourself today? Because she works, 6 days on, 6 days off.
Mhm.
She's like, yeah, I love Mike McDaniel. You're right. He's like my favorite coach in the NFL too. And I'm like, who is this woman? Like, I'm so
What a
lucky.
vibe.
But I say all this to tell you, she gave insight into Hard Knocks, and it's really interesting that the Giants Hard Knocks feels like it's made by different people. Because when you watch the Jets Hard Knocks or the Dolphins Hard Knocks, the people are so compelling. They're telling stories about the players, who they are. You're getting to Mike McDaniel. He's talking about overcoming his alcoholism. It's so compelling. And the Giants organization is just a fucking, pardon my French, the most boring organization I've ever come across. It's crazy. Like how, I don't know. I feel bad for the people making the show. They're like, how do we make this interesting? You got John Mara, this stiff, boring old dude who doesn't know football, just running around telling people what to do. You got Brian Dable who comes across, my God. So Molly loves Mike McDaniel. And what's the name of the coach? Dan Campbell in Detroit. She loves him.
Yeah.
Every time she watches him, she's like, and mind you, my girlfriend doesn't know football. She knows people. She pointed out, and she's like, dude, this guy, Brian Dable in New York, is awful. Like the quarterback's terrible. Daniel Jones has no presence, but the coach, he's like interviewing players, draft picks, Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, quarterbacks. Jane Daniels walks in the building, and he's like sitting back, like, I can't. This is mean, but it's true. Like Jabba the Hutt style, like not sitting up, not making eye contact, like for some reason, like lounging himself on a couch, just looking like a mob boss, asking questions in this weird way, and it's just his energy's off. Brian Dable's making fun of players while they're running a 40-yard dash, and it comes across like disrespectful. Like, hey, dude, you could never run a 40-yard dash. What are you talking about? And I never would have expected Hard Knocks to make me hate Brian Dable, but it's like, this dude sucks. Like, he does not come across like a person I'd ever want to work with or play for. And I didn't expect that. I think the Giants have intentionally had a lot of stuff cut out of their Hard Knock season. You can tell, like, there's a lot of conversations that are not included in the show. And it leaves you wondering all the time, like, well, what'd they just do right there? And this is the stuff they left in. It makes me wonder about the stuff they cut out of this freaking show. It's like, man, it's not a good look for the Giants. I don't know if you watched any of it, but if you haven't, I encourage you to look and check it out because it's like, it's not a good look for the Giants. It's very interesting.
I haven't loved how it looks. I think in the last episode that we recorded together, I talked about it kind of being a hit piece for Daniel Jones. Basically, this to me is a cry for help's not the word. It's a public way to say, hey, we're not going to be very good next year. We're trying to, and we believe we're going in the right direction, but we're not going to be very good. As far as Brian Daboll goes, I think maybe it's a little bit of a bad rap. I believe that he is trying to exude this kind of calm, cool, funny guy that maybe, these young kids going through the draft process want to relate to and sitting back, cracking jokes, like looking lounge. I think that's kind of what he was going for. I'm not sure that came across maybe as well as he would have hoped. But I think that there's enough goodwill around the NFL and people say great things about Brian Daboll that I'm not concerned about his ability to coach or get guys moving in the right direction. I just think that maybe he was trying to be a little bit more, be something he wasn't for the sake of appearing a certain way.
Here's what I know.
And I don't think it landed.
Wink Martindale, the former defensive coordinator of the Giants, like hates Brian Dable. Like he the way he left was with deep frustration towards Brian Dable, the head coach. There's something there. And I think the Giants sweep it under the rug. They don't talk about it, but something went on in that relationship. And I don't know, man. I've got a pretty good sense. Like my alarm bells go off, and I don't think I'm like easily triggered. Something about Brian Dable is just it's sending off alarm bells. It's too many stories now. It's the Daniel Jones contract and the way he's played, and Wink Martindale leaving, and now with the way he's interacting with players and making fun of the 40-yard dash. None of it lands for me. I think this guy sucks. Like I really don't think. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is a guy who coached under Nick Saban and Bill Belichick, and if he's from the Bill Belichick coaching tree, like how successful have those guys been? I don't know. It's interesting because after 1 year, you would say Brian Dable, coach of the year, took a Giants to a playoff game. But after year 2 and now going into year 3, I'm kind of like, I don't know, man. I really don't like this guy. And it's weird to say that, but it's honest.
And they kind of alluded to it. That playoff year, what did they have? They had a healthy Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
I don't know what running back is worth, $20 million, but Saquon Barkley is one of those guys that he fills a lot of gaps for your teams. He takes a lot of attention, and even with that attention, he still finds a way to make plays. Anyways, Giants, I don't know. They're gonna be what they're gonna be.
Yeah,
I do think that they were publicly saying, "Hey, we're not going to be very good this year. We're overpaying a quarterback who's not very good. We don't have a lot of weapons. We got a weapon in the draft. We hope he's the right guy. We feel pretty good that he's the right guy."
Do you have a minute for one more thing?
Yeah, I got plenty of time. When you said we were going to go, I was like, "Wait, what?"
So Joe Shane.
I thought we were going to do the predictions.
We can't. Joe Shane, I really enjoy him. He's a nerd. He's like a dweeb, but I really do like. I like his approach as a general manager. I think if I fired the head coach, if I fired Brian Dable, I might keep him. I think he's got the Giants' best interest at heart. He's principled. I think he made the team better by building the offensive line, not overpaying a running back, putting him in a position to maybe get the right quarterback down the road, and then you're really cooking with gas. I don't know. I got a really good sense from Joe Shane, even though he's kind of a dweeb, and he's got terrible negotiation skills. Like he seems like he could never do sales. I think it's when it comes to like evaluating players and making decisions based on value, he's actually really good at that. And I don't know that anyone else is going to have his back after watching Hard Knocks. I'll say it. I think he's made some pretty good decisions, and I think he's also, you can tell the way he interacts with John Mara, the football, the president of operations / owner / old dude who doesn't know football very well. You can tell he has to navigate that relationship carefully and kind of tiptoe. And I think he does a good job both putting him in his place peacefully, but also, holding respect and not embarrassing John Mara. So I don't know if you remember that scene where they're like going through all the situations and John Mara's kind of like, why are we doing this? He goes, well, that's why we're doing this, to prepare ourselves for every eventual possibility. And it's like John Mara just isn't really with it. Doesn't really seem to understand how the process works. It's like, dude, how have you been around football your whole life and still don't get it? But I digress. How about this? I don't feel comfortable putting out a number. Like I can't predict a number, a win total for these teams. But let's go through what you have. You have stuff prepared, I would imagine, and I'm very willing to like react to what you got. Do you want to go through every team? I'm totally down for that.
Yeah, why not? Do you want to start with the NFC West?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs go.
Or the AFC West.
I just said NFC. Did I say NFC or AFC West?
Yeah, but you meant AFC West.
Definitely meant AFC West. But I was looking at my NFC sheet. Here we go. NFC West. Let's start with the 49ers. I think they have another 12-5 season. I say 12-5. I think every game on the schedule for the Niners is winnable. But it's just going to come down to a few plays here or there when you start to play some of those better teams. I believe this year, who do they have? They've got the AFC East on the schedule. So the team
Mm.
that kind of makes things really, really funky for me across all the teams in the NFC West is the Jets. I don't know how good the Jets are going to be. So it's kind of hard for me to calculate, the wins. But yeah, another 12-5, an 11-6 season, kind of pending, you know, how good the Packers are this year. That's going to be a big one. But then how the Jets play. And I think those are kind of the two swing games. I think they sweep everybody in the NFC West, except they split games with the Rams. And then, yeah, there'll just be a few other marquee games that they play this year that'll go either way.
Let's talk through their schedule because week 1, the 49ers play the Jets in Santa Clara. So Aaron Rodgers in his former stomping ground, kind of where he grew up in Northern California, playing his childhood team. That'll be like
Where
so much fun.
he's choked so many times.
Oh, yeah. And then week 2, they go to Sam Darnold. Because I believe Sam Darnold's going to be the week 1 and 2 starting quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings. So
That's a
Sam
win.
Darnold playing his former team, the 49ers, that'll be interesting.
That's
Then
a
the
win.
Rams. Now,
I
let's
think
skip a
early in
couple
the
of games.
season. I think early
Yeah.
in the season they beat the Rams.
Okay. They got a lot of tough games. They play Kansas City week 7. That's an incredible matchup.
It's an either way game.
They play Dallas the following week 8.
Blow the doors off them.
Got their bye week. Couple games go by. They play at Green Bay and then at Buffalo back to back in the end of November and the first day of December.
Yes, that's going to be a tough stretch.
The 2 games to really watch, the games I'm most excited for. I mean, there's a lot of great games. Their schedule really is. No one can accuse the 49ers schedule of being tough of being easy this year. Like no one,
Not at
we're
all.
not going to look back and go, wow, they're playing a lot of high level quarterbacks and really good football teams. But week 16 at Miami is really interesting because Mike McDaniel used to be the run game coordinator for the 49ers. Their offenses are so similar in the way they use motion and run the ball in all kinds of funky formations. And then the following week, the 49ers play against Detroit in the Bay Area. And I just think, man, between the Jets, the Rams twice, Kansas City, Dallas, Green Bay, Buffalo, Miami, and Detroit, that's a lot of tough games against playoff teams. I mean, this is a really tough schedule. That 12-5 is a bold prediction for that schedule.
I'll go ahead and downgrade that to 11-6. Again, just because there's going to be some games that are go either way games. Both teams will likely show up and play good ball, and it might come down to who has the ball last, or if there's a game defining turnover or a special teams play or something like that.
Yeah, I wonder who's going to get them that we don't expect. There's always a game every year. Some team loses to a team you probably shouldn't. Whether that's Arizona week 5 or Seattle week 6. I don't know who. Maybe coming off a bye week, they probably don't lose to Tampa, but maybe it's Seattle the following weekend. I'm not really sure. Like someone's going to get the 49ers to slip up that we don't expect. But here's the thing: even with playing Kansas City, Dallas, Green Bay, Buffalo, Miami, Detroit, the Jets, I think the 49ers on paper are better than all of those teams. So like 12-5 isn't crazy because yeah, you're going to lose some of those games just because that's what happens in football. But I mean, is anyone better on paper than the 49ers? Like truly, I don't know.
No, and that's the thing. You could make an argument that they could go 15-2 if the ball bounces their way every time it needs to, right?
Yeah.
It's just, can they stay healthy? Will their opponents stay healthy? And yeah, do you get caught sleeping in a home game? Like, do the Rams come to town that second time and trounce you? Do the Lions come to town and surprise you late in the season? Although I do think the Niners win that game handily. Late in the Bay Area, or late in the year in the Bay Area, it's going to be cold, foggy, windy, rainy, not ideal conditions for a Jared Goff performance. Yeah, like I said, I think that they've got at least 5 wins guaranteed in the division, and then yeah, we'll see who they get, who trips them up.
Think about this. Two more things about their schedule, right? You play the Jets and the Dolphins. Both head coaches used to coach under Kyle Shanahan. They know him very intimately. I wonder how does that play a role with Robert Saleh playing one of his best friends, Kyle Shanahan, a guy they coached together for a long time, was the defensive coordinator of the 49ers. Does that impact their matchup at all? Like, how does that play a role in that game? Is it possible the Jets defense has a little more success against the 49ers than a typical defense would because of the familiarity? Or does it hurt them too? We don't know. Then the other
Yeah.
thought is this. You're playing Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, probably maybe it doesn't matter, Jordan Love, Josh Allen, and Tua. And then Matthew Stafford twice.
Caleb Williams?
Caleb Williams.
Throw
Oh my
him in there,
gosh, you're
maybe?
right. I wonder how many times we're going to watch the 49ers this year and go, the opposing team's got a better quarterback. Like, whether it could be just Josh Allen, Caleb Williams, Patrick Mahomes, and Jordan Love, and Matthew Stafford, and Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that's a lot of times. That's a lot of times I just said the other team's got a better quarterback than the 49ers. That doesn't mean they're going to lose a game, but I think this year is going to put a lot of perspective onto Brock Purdy, where we go, oh, we're getting head-to-head comparisons between him and a quarterback who's far superior talent-wise and ability-wise. And that's going to be fascinating. Like, I wonder how we're going to feel about Brock Purdy, after week 15, when they have just played Jordan Love, Josh Allen, Caleb Williams, and then Matthew Stafford back to back to back to back to back. And you've watched Brock Purdy go head to head against those four quarterbacks 4 weeks in a row. I really think we're going to go, oh man, Brock Purdy is getting outclassed every week.
That, and I am truly concerned about the Niners defense this year. Obviously, a couple years ago, they couldn't afford to keep Bosa, Buckner, and Armstead. Buckner had to walk. Armstead left for Jacksonville. So now you're left from that core front. You've got Nick Bosa, right? Excellent. Yeah. But you've got nobody on that interior really helping him out. You had Kinlaw obviously lose his Achilles in the Super Bowl. Talanoa Huafunga coming off of the ACL injury. I'm very worried about that. Plus a new defensive coordinator after firing Wilkes, and the defense perhaps not performing how it should have last year. That's going to be a big question mark this year. And so if you're not getting turnovers and sacks, how is that going to translate, to the offensive side of the ball? How much more is going to be asked of Brock Purdy this year? How many more points are they going to have to score? And will they have to come from behind now a few more times this year instead of getting that lead and grounding and pounding the football? So I think that's going to be interesting to watch. Wow, hold on. We just went to 10-7. 10-7 for the Niners. I'm going to go ahead and lock that in.
Okay. I think the quarterback matchups are just going to be, it's a lot of quarterbacks better than Brock Purdy you're playing, and a lot of good football teams. Who do you have finishing second in the NFC West?
In the NFC West, finishing second, I do have the Los Angeles Rams.
That sounds about right.
And I think that because I have them splitting with the Niners, their matchups this year, they could very well end up winning the division based on how the rest of the schedule for both of the teams play out. Again, you're bringing back the veteran Matt Stafford. Kind of similar note to the struggles that we may see for the Niners. The defense to me is a big question mark for the Rams. But again, that offense is just about to have so much firepower. Stafford throwing the ball to Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. You've got Tutu Atwell, Tyler Higbee, provided he comes back healthy. You've got Kyron Williams and Blake Corum. Like, you just have an offense that is set up to distribute the ball to so many different players who can make all different kinds of plays. And that's going to be exciting. But again, how does that defense hold up?
It's going to be a lot easier schedule than the 49ers have. You still play Buffalo, the Jets, and Miami. And by the way, they start the year on the road at Detroit. So Matthew Stafford in Detroit, September 8th on Sunday, week 1.
So that's going to be so much fun.
But they start their year
900 to 900.
Oh yeah, they also play the NFC North. So they play Detroit, Chicago, Green Bay, and Minnesota. So teams Matthew Stafford has a lot of familiarity with, and fan bases Matthew Stafford has a lot of familiarity with. So
yeah,
look, Detroit week 1, that's a really tough game. I'm not sure who wins that one. But then Arizona's a winnable game. The 49ers is interesting. They probably lose. But
I
then
think they
at
lose that first
Chicago,
matchup. Yeah.
Chicago's a great opportunity. They start 2-2 minimum. We'll see about the Green Bay game. That's in LA though. And I still like, even though I really believe in Jordan Love, he's about to get paid a ton of money. I think the Rams might be a better team than the Packers. They're both young teams. They're both up and coming, but I think the veteran leadership in LA is stronger than what they got in Green Bay. And then you got a bye week to prepare for the bad Raiders organization. Minnesota, Seattle, the Patriots are awful. Philly's tough, but interesting. And then at New Orleans, I don't have a lot of confidence in New Orleans. Like, I think there's a lot of winnable games on the Rams schedule where you're right. I think it evens out and you end up in a very similar place as the 49ers. That makes a lot of sense to me, where they could have an identical record and maybe win the division by splitting it with the 49ers.
Yep. So yeah, 10-7, 9-8 type season, but it's going to feel like a really, really good 9-8. I don't know how else to say that, because anytime you're around 500, you don't feel like you had a great season. But again, looking at the schedule, the games that they could lose, compared to the guaranteed wins that they have, it could feel like a really good 9-8.
Who do we think they lose to? Like, Detroit is 1, 49ers is 2, Miami 3, Buffalo 4, Jets 5. Where do you get 3 more losses maybe in that? Maybe a Seattle, maybe a Green Bay. Like, I think they could go 10-7 again. I mean, really, honestly,
I think it's late in the season. A game against the Bills. I feel like the Bills typically have a strong finish to the season, even if they don't have necessarily a great start. And we saw that last year. I think the Jets have potential to get them late as well, especially if they're playing for something in those last few weeks. Maybe they're on that playoff bubble and really need to ball out. And then I think, hosting the Dolphins, again, we're talking about the defense, and you want to talk about an offense that comes with serious firepower. The Dolphins, coming into SoFi Stadium, you're playing on turf. It's LA. It'll be good weather. Obviously, you're inside. That could be a dangerous game for them as well.
I wonder what games the Rams are going to lose they shouldn't lose. Like, maybe they lose to Chicago. Chicago is much improved. They got a lot of weapons on offense. By their 4th week of the season, maybe Caleb Williams is in a different spot than week 1. Maybe that New Orleans game is kind of a trap, where New Orleans is better than they were last year. There's going to be a game or two where they lose that you feel like, the Rams were a better team and they still lost. And those are the kind of games that feel like could happen there. Maybe Minnesota, maybe Chicago, maybe New Orleans. But those are the games that feel like a trap to me. It won't
be New Orleans. As long as Dennis Allen's the head coach, that's not happening. They needed to fire him. I don't know why they didn't.
I think it's because they had no one better to hire in New Orleans.
I would have hired anybody.
What do you see happening with Seattle this year?
Seattle has a very disappointing season this year, I think. Disappointing because there's a lot of promise with a new head coach. And like we talked about a little bit earlier, Ryan Grubb, having some weapons to play with between DK, JSN, and Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett a little bit older. You've got Kenneth Walker coming off of a number of injuries at the running back position. Yes, you have Zach Charbonnet, who already has, I don't even know how many carries after his time at UCLA. I just don't know what we're going to get out of Geno Smith. And I feel like there's a lot of potential there, and we're going to see flashes of it. But I think that we're going to have a relatively disappointing for the Seahawks and probably finish in and around the 7-10 range.
Yeah, I got them starting 3-6. I think they lose to Denver, Miami, Detroit, the 49ers, Buffalo, and the Rams minimum. Maybe they probably beat a bad Patriots team, the Giants, and Atlanta. But that's a 3-6 start to their season going into their bye week.
I don't even think they'll beat Atlanta.
Yeah, and then again, a bad stretch at the end. After the bye week, they still got the 49ers, the Jets, Green Bay, Chicago by week 17. They got to play at Chicago week 17. Try telling me Caleb Williams isn't going to be a much better quarterback by the end of the year than he is to start the year. Right. Week 17 in Chicago is a much different Bears team than week 1 in Chicago.
Right.
And then they end the year on Sunday, January 5th at LA against the Rams. I think you're right. I think Seattle's got a long year ahead of them. A lot of transition, a lot of new coaching staff, a lot of new people on the coaching staff, and a lot of really difficult games on their schedule, in my opinion, for the
Yeah.
Seahawks.
And I don't see any pull away ability for them. So I think every game that they win is going to be a relatively close game. I don't think that they have that
Mm,
extra gear to blow somebody out, and they don't have a
yeah.
defense that can, you know, help support and create a blowout. So you're going to be in a dogfight pretty much every week, and that's going to lead to, again, like losing some games maybe that you shouldn't,
Mm,
and maybe winning some games maybe that you shouldn't. It'll just be a mixed bag. But again, 7-10 is about where I see the Hawks.
yeah. How about the Cardinals?
Ah, man, I just
Here's my question: what kind of impact does Marvin Harrison Jr. really make? Like, is he? People act like he's going to win them 5 more games, and I'm like, man, I just don't know that a rookie receiver, is really going to be the end all be all game changer for a football team that needs so much all over the
yeah.
field.
I think that you've got Kyler coming back. He should be healthy. He showed that he can still, run around, which is a big part of his game. He still throws a beautiful football, has a strong arm. I think that they'll find ways to create matchups for him similar to what you saw the Vikings do with Justin Jefferson. Just like, hey, find a way to get this dude the football. And so it may not translate to a bunch of touchdowns and some wins, but you're definitely going to see a lot of yards and productions out of Marvin Harrison Jr. I think Zay Jones was an underrated pickup for them with the exit of
Yeah.
Hollywood Brown. So now you got Zay Jones in there. You've got Trey. Is it Trey or Tyler McBride? The tight end who really started to blossom
Trey
last
McBride.
year.
Trey
Trey
McBride.
McBride, right. So now you've got 3 very solid receiving options for Kyler Murray to go with the football. You've still got James Conner back there in the backfield. You've got kind of that gadget guy in Rondale Moore, provided he can stay healthy. So there's some interesting and very curious things, but you know, this seems to be kind of the plague now that we're talking about these NFC West teams is the defense. The defense, I just have no idea about. And outside of Buda Baker, I'm not sure who is going to, again, like step up to create plays to get the game going in your favor. So I
They've
think they'll
actually made a
surprise a
lot
couple
of.
teams. Yeah,
Well,
6
if
and
you
11. 6 and 11, 7 and 10
6'11",
is where I see these guys.
with Jonah Williams at right tackle, Paris Johnson at left tackle, Will Hernandez, they're really trying on the offensive line. They've got Sean Murphy Bunting at corner, came over from Tampa. That's where I knew of him last.
Mm-hmm.
Kazir White, BJ Ojolari, Zaven Collins are waiting to break out, but there's actually some interesting names here. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's potential on this roster where if they're well coached and develop, they're going to be interesting and competitive. I would love to see Arizona come out of the gate and surprise a lot of people. Unfortunately, their first 3 games are fucking brutal.
Brutal.
At Buffalo week 1, then the Rams, and then Detroit. Then a break against Washington. And then, dude, it's so bad. They play the 49ers at the 49ers. Then they play at Green Bay. Then they play a much better Chargers team with Jim Harbaugh. They play at Miami, then Chicago, then the Jets. So they are going to have like 1 win going into their bye week, week 11. That's
Yeah.
a horrifying first 10 games for the Arizona Cardinals. I feel terrible for them. I mean, that's all but one of those teams is a borderline playoff team. Chicago's not, but they're going to be much better than Arizona is.
Yeah.
And I mean, man, I think you start 2-8 minimum. Like, sorry, at best, excuse
Yeah.
me, at best.
It's plausible. And they do get a little bit of a schedule break. You got the Vikings, the Seahawks, the Patriots, the Panthers, a 4-week stretch of all very winnable games for your team. Maybe the Seahawks, twice.
Yeah, you end
Kind of within
hot.
that time frame as well. So,
Yeah.
but then you run into the Rams and the Niners to close it out. So you might have built yourself some momentum, and then the big dogs come home to steal your lunch right before the end of the season, just to send you off with that sour taste.
When if the Rams and 49ers are close, like we think they might be, you're not getting a week 18 game where they bench their starters. It might be a game where they're actually trying to win week 18 and beat you. So
Yeah.
like your
No
best games,
layups.
best chances to win Washington week 4 against a team that might have a better quarterback than you. You got Chicago, Carolina, the Patriots, Minnesota, and Seattle. Those are your winnable games, quite honestly. And again, I think Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels might be better than Kyler Murray this year. I know that's crazy talk. I don't mind that. I can own that if I'm wrong. I I don't know, man. I think this is going
You
to be a
think
really
Jade?
ugly year.
You said Jaden Daniels was going to be better than Kyler Murray this year?
He might be.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
a
well, I
hot
mean,
take.
we'll see. That's fine, but
It's hot, 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 hot.
I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not a given. It's going to be
Sure.
interesting, and I think he's going to be competitive and score points. And I don't know, man. Maybe it's disrespectful to Kyler. I don't mean to be. I'm telling you, these first 10 weeks for Arizona are going to be abs. I would think Arizona Cardinals fans know it's going to be a really rough year. Like when you look at your schedule, you didn't get any favors at all. Like not even close. How about Kansas City? They added Marquise Hollywood Brown, and I forgot about that. Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown.
Added a lot of speed.
Dude, we know we don't give enough credit to Brett Veach, the general manager of Kansas City. I think we overlook that so often because they've got a great quarterback and a great coach. But like, dude, that guy every year makes exactly the right moves to get them ready to go. They've won back-to-back Super Bowls, and like somehow we don't talk about him like he's a legendary, great general manager. He
Yeah.
just added 2 new weapons at receiver. I don't know, man. Kansas City is. I find them boring because they're so dominant and so good. It's like I don't even care. I just assume they're going to win the Super Bowl every year.
Yeah, I think this year in particular we're going to see kind of the return of the Kansas City we were used to seeing with, Mahomes
Flash.
in the early part of his career, a little more flash. And I think part of that is he's learned how to take what the defense gives him, make checks at the line of scrimmage. Maybe all you need to do is make that 3-4 yard run or that 3-4 yard screen pass. But now you're adding 2 guys who can absolutely blow the top off of a defense with Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy. You've got Rashee Rice with a ton of confidence coming back this year after the way he closed last year. Obviously, you've got Travis Kelce coming back as well. And then your defense is largely coming back outside of L'Jarius Sneed. You're in really, really good shape if you're Kansas City. Now, the tough part is for all of the AFC West is they have to play the NFC North this year. And those are some tough, rugged games to play, regardless of the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh. The defenses for those teams are relentless, and those are going to be tough. But regardless, I think we've got a 12-5 season for the Chiefs. They've got one of the harder schedules, in my opinion. They've got also the most question marks to me. Just this whole division is a question mark outside of the Chiefs. There's been a lot of change and a lot of turnover for the 3 teams kind of below. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But, late in the year, they've got the Panthers, they've got the Raiders, but also late in the year, they've got the Texans, which I think is going to be incredibly interesting. They've got a stretch where they go Browns, Texans, Steelers. And to me, that is going to determine what kind of playoff run that they have. I'm assuming that they will have already, clinched a playoff berth at that point. But how are you playing in Cleveland late in the season? You're hosting the Texans late in the season. This young CJ Stroud guy's coming in, slinging the rock all over the place. And then again, you got to go play a Mike Tomlin defense, and that's very, very difficult.
I honestly would be surprised if Kansas City was the number 1 seed in the AFC. Quite honestly, I think that they're going to be probably the 2 or 3 seed, given what you're seeing with their schedule. They got 8 games that, for me, like they're tough, but for me, they're must-watch TV. Like I can't wait. They play the Ravens, the Bengals, and then Atlanta week 3. So the first 3 games are all like incredible. Then they play at the Chargers, a team that's going to be, I think, a lot better with a new coach. But then they play the 49ers, the Bills, the Chargers again, at Cleveland, and then Houston. All of these teams that I just listed are in the mix for a playoff spot. That's
Tough.
as a fan of football, it's going to be incredible. It's going to be so much fun to watch Patrick Mahomes head to head against great quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, Herbert twice, CJ Stroud, a really good defense in Cleveland. I mean, man, it's a gift for us football fans, but it's a harder path. And so because of their schedule, I think I'm very comfortable saying Kansas City's probably going to be the second or third seed in the AFC, and might, if they, if Buffalo, for example, wins their division and is the number one seed, they might have to go to Buffalo for the AFC title game to get to the Super Bowl, and that's a very different conversation. But that's how the schedule works out. Is I think they're going to have a really tough road because of the way things have shaken out schedule wise for them. Unless they're go ahead.
Who's the leading returning receiver for the Buffalo Bills?
Gosh, is it Gabe Davis?
No, he's in Jacksonville.
He's in
That's my
Jacksonville.
point. I think how
Mm-hmm.
this is different, right? Because we still have Josh Allen at quarterback.
Well, it's Khalil Shakur, but they got Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, and Khalil Shakur. They have weapons in Buffalo.
Shakur is great as a 3. Curtis Samuel also great as a 2 or a 3. Keon Coleman, rookie, we don't know what he's going to be. Jury's still out. My point is, I think Sean McDermott's voice is starting to reach that Pete Carroll point where you haven't gotten over the hump. I truly think that they passed that window to get over the hump, and now you have to run up against a Kansas City team that's only getting better, a Bengals team that's going to be better. Like, I just think that there's better AFC talent, and from 2020 to 2022, 23, like that was really their chance. And I don't think they got it done. And at this point, I don't think they will. They also moved off of a lot of their expensive, veterans on the defensive side. Not to make this about the Bills, but I see a big regression for them this year.
I think Buffalo trimmed the fat, though. I think they did cut their expensive veterans for the betterment of their future. You could look at it the other way if you want. It's, hey, they said we got to build towards our future. Listen to the receivers they've got in training camp. Take a listen to this. So, Khalil Shakur, Keon Coleman, and Curtis Samuel. But on top of that, Mac Hollins, Chase Claypool, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Justin Shorter, KJ Hamler, and Andy Isabella. It's a lot of interesting names. It's a lot of guys that go, you're playing with an elite quarterback, Josh Allen. I don't know, man. I've been waiting for Chase Claypool to really reach his potential. Maybe it happens here. I think Keon Coleman's awesome. I know you're like going to sleep at the wheel, but I don't look at this receiver room and go, they're a huge disadvantage. I go, it's a new group and they're going to have a lot to work on. But them with Josh Allen, it's interesting to me. It's certainly better than a bunch of no-name guys. Would you agree on that?
I mean, just because we know their name doesn't necessarily, make it any better.
But these are people that have made plays on other teams. I guess what I'm trying to say is these are guys who have contributed to like a lot of wins in the NFL. These are not no-name.
Mac Hollins has?
Okay. I guess you're pushing me.
Andy Isabella? He came from Arizona, I believe, right?
Yeah. He's awesome. I guess. But that's 3 deep.
Again, Curtis Samuel.
You're talking about their third string.
Curtis Samuel and Keon Coleman are the guys that you look at. Shakur, again, great to have him coming back, but benefited from having Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. They need Keon Coleman to be a true number 1 wide receiver to open it up for everyone else. Because all those other guys who have been in the league for a number of years now, they're not number 1s. And if they were number 1s or number 2s, they wouldn't be on this ridiculously large depth chart for Bills training camp.
Here's the thing, and what you're totally right about is like head to head Buffalo or KC. I'll take KC all day.
Every day.
The Chiefs are much more dangerous. I almost said it backwards. The Chiefs are a much more dangerous team than Buffalo, and
they got more dangerous.
And they're franchises that are in different positions entirely. Buffalo's trying to regroup and get it together, whereas Kansas City reloaded after winning their second Super Bowl in a row. Right? Like,
it's crazy.
Horrifying.
Crazy.
Where do you see the Chargers landing? Are they your second team in the AFC West, or is it Denver?
that's another one where I think that the Chargers and the Broncos are going to split. So for that,
May I say something real quick? Actually,
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
the question marks in the division, the AFC West, actually play to the strength of Kansas City when they've got a bunch of tough games. I think it's actually kind of like, it's not exactly like the Patriots when the Patriots dominated the Jets and the Bills and the Dolphins being terrible for years. But I think we're still a year away from all the other teams in the division. Denver's figuring it out with the new coach. The Chargers are literally figuring it out with a brand new coach. The Raiders have a new coach. It's a lot of teams in that division that are probably still a year away from being where they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Kansas City is just rolling on all cylinders. I think they might sweep the division, actually. Like, it's very
Yeah,
possible.
I look at it this way, right? You've got the old adage, like when coaches talk about building a team, you've got the form, storm, norm, and perform, right? You got to form the team. You got to have this storm of trying to figure out how everybody's working. You got to figure out what the norm is for your team, and then you got to perform. Chiefs are at perform and then some,
Mm.
performing at a top tier level. Meanwhile, you've got everyone else in the division at that forming the team and storming. They're trying to figure each other out, right? Internally. And this isn't even talking about trying to figure out what the other teams are doing. So, yeah, like you said, they are going to benefit from being the team with the most returning consistency.
I can offer insight, and I don't know that this directly compares to the NFL. The NFL is a different game. In high school, I'm taking over as offensive coordinator at a school that has one win in 2 years. They're awful. We have Central Catholic in our division, so we play Central Catholic every single year. They win state. They're really, really good. They're not even on my radar. Like, they're so much better than us. I'm not even concerned with beating them right now. Like, I need to figure out how to beat Putnam and Forest Grove and our easier winnable games. Like, let's get to where we're winning 4 or 5 games a year, then start setting our focus on Central Catholic. Like, they're not even on our radar yet. I don't know that the NFL is exactly like that, because it's way more level playing field. They're all professional. It's a little different. But if I'm Jim Harbaugh or I'm Sean Payton, I'm just trying to win games. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
take down the Kansas City Chiefs right now. Like, that's the next thing. Once we figure out how to win, then we set our sights on Kansas City. And I know the NFL's different, right? It's You're paying guys millions of dollars. It's a level playing field. There's not literally kids on scholarship compared to your kids. That
Right.
it's different. But I think it's also possible that if you're Jim Harbaugh or Sean Payton right now, the last thing you're trying to figure out is how to take down Kansas City right now. You're just trying to win games and not lose your job.
Yeah, and here's the great part, right? Like I see this team being a 9-8 team, potentially 10-7 for this reason alone. They close with the Buccaneers, the Broncos, the Patriots, and the Raiders. All
Which
of
team?
those,
Denver?
um,
The
the
Chargers.
the Chargers.
Yeah.
So closing with the Bucks, the Broncos at home, and then you got the Patriots, and then you got the Raiders. I think those are
Mm.
4 very, very winnable games to give you some positive momentum to potentially be in a wild card playoff spot. Again, I think they've got some tougher games earlier in the season. You got to go to the Steelers, you got to go to the Broncos, but there's a lot of winnable games outside of those AFC North matchups. You've got the Panthers. Um, You've got the Saints in there. You've got the Titans in there. Like there's a lot of opportunity. And then say you sneak one off of, Kansas City, right? Like you catch them slipping and Justin Herbert has a great game. Now all of a sudden, you're in some really good shape. But I think 9-8 is more realistic, but that could flex, up or down one win. Um, yeah, based on how they close out the season.
I don't know. I think we might be. I think the Chargers might be a 10-11 win team. I mean, I think you're better than the Raiders. At Carolina is a gift from God. Week 2. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I think they got a way better team and better quarterback than Pittsburgh. Even though you're playing at Pittsburgh, I'm not intimidated by that. They're going to be Denver. New Orleans is a good game. They win. At Cleveland is a really interesting game because their philosophies are the same. We're going to win up front, play good defense. Like that game November 3rd at Cleveland between the Chargers and Browns is really good and compelling. You're
Mm.
probably going to beat Tennessee.
Hmm.
Atlanta is interesting. Tampa, Denver, New England are going to trounce them. At the Raiders at the end of the year is going to be a really meaningful game. Like, I really see like on paper possibly 10 wins for the Chargers, and that's because I expect them to run the ball well, be really good up front, and take care of business against lesser teams. And I think they're going to be playing less Carolina, Arizona, New Orleans, Tennessee. These are lesser teams that they should take
Yeah.
care of business and beat.
I do just worry about the weapons. I do think the receiving core is going to be sneaky good for this team. I think Joshua Palmer, I think in a more featured role, has
Yeah.
potential to be solid. Obviously, they drafted Lad McConkney, who I think has potential to be great as well.
DJ Chark.
Uh, yeah, they picked up GJ Chark, and then they also picked up Brendan Rice. If you're picking up Brendan Rice, you know that that dude has work ethic. You know that that dude is going to understand how to play in the NFL. And I think that that might surprise and shock some people. That, and then we don't know how this defense is going to play. It's still expensive. It's starting to be old. These guys are injured a lot. I'm curious how that defense looks under the Jim Harbaugh regime. But yeah, I think 9 wins is comfortable. And again, we got to give them grace to get everybody moving in the same direction. So, there's a world where they slip up against the Steelers. They could even slip up against the Panthers with Dave Canales now out there. Um, but then again, a Jim Harbaugh team is a well-coached team.
Let's set our
Tough to
sights on
say.
Denver. Let's
Yeah.
talk about the Denver Broncos. I'm fascinated what you think it's pretty close between Denver and the Chargers.
I think it's pretty close. I think that they're finishing closer to the 8 and 9. Kind of a similar model to a season that they had last year. I don't think that they lose as many games up front. Um, and I think they actually have a pretty easy schedule to start the season, which is going to be great for their momentum. Um,
I got a thought early on, if I may.
yeah. Bo Nix is just a question mark. Um, but you'll probably beat the Seahawks. You're hosting the Steelers. You can beat the Buccaneers. Jets will be interesting. You can beat the Raiders. You're hosting the Chargers. There's a lot of opportunity there.
Uh, So I think if I understand, you would put Denver and the Chargers in a similar category, right around the same spot. But I just don't, because I think that Herbert's legitimately like an elite top 5 quarterback in the NFL, and that's just
Agreed.
not Bo Nix. I mean, it just
Skodux.
they're just in different complete worlds to me. Um, Especially, no, it's not a knock on Bo Nix. It's we don't know what he is. We know what Herbert is, and we know he's incredible. And to
Hmm.
expect Bo Nix to be anywhere near what Herbert is going to be week 1 is not even possible. Um, so all
Fair.
these games, any games that are close with the Chargers, I'm going to give to the Chargers because they got an elite quarterback and a proven coach who's won a lot in the NFL and college. Sean Payton and Bo Nix have proven nothing. So all these close games, like
That's
New
fair. That's
Orleans is
fair.
tough. At New Orleans is tough. Tampa Bay, Baker Mayfield's no slouch. He's going to bring his best. Pittsburgh is a tough game for Denver. Seattle's not a bad game. All these tough games to me, like the Colts is a really tough game. And Anthony Richardson's awesome. Like all these games on the margins, it could go either way for the Denver Broncos.
Hmm.
I'm less inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt because they're playing teams that have a better quarterback. They've been together for longer. I don't know, man. I hope 8-9 is a good prediction for the Broncos, but I see a lot more. Like again, New Orleans, right? Is this
Hmm.
game that could go either way, and it's an emotional game for Sean Payton. So maybe he brings his best, but maybe it
Right.
also works the other way against him. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
There's certainly that world where it is 7 and 10. Again, you got to play the AFC North. You don't know what Bo Nix is. You've got some tough games on the road. You're even hosting a few tough games. It could be ugly, but the team won ugly last year. That's what they did.
hmm.
They made it messy and they made it tough, even on the best teams in the league, because they bring that grittiness and they bring that Sean Payton. We're here to do it one way, and that's going to be the gritty and tough way. So I'm going to give them that based off of what they did last year. Um, hopefully a little bit more, coach and quarterback continuity in terms of being on the same page and buying into exactly what they want to do on the offensive side of the football. Hopefully that opens up the run game a little bit more, but I think they're still lacking, lacking offensively in terms of weapons. Hopefully Tim Patrick comes back healthy as well. That'd be huge for them.
What's the best possible outcome for Bo Nix this year, you think?
Like statistically?
Yeah, like what's his season look like? Is he going to be really efficient, play more like Drew Brees did, get the ball out of his hands really quickly,
Yeah,
um,
I
play
think you're
within
gonna.
structure?
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of what he did at Oregon, right? Is play within that structure, deliver the ball to the playmakers, and when called upon, make that move with his feet. I think he's more athletic than people give him credit for, having watched him
Mm-hmm.
over the past couple of years at the University of Oregon. Um, he's accurate. He knows where to go with the football, and I think that that's what Sean Payton's looking for. And I think that that's going to give him a lot of confidence very early in his career to feel like the coach wants you and that you're going to do what he's asking of you. So I think best case scenario for him, I think probably 3,300 yards, maybe 27 touchdowns, and probably a pretty low interception number. Bo didn't throw a lot of picks. Granted, Oregon was far superior to a lot of the teams that they were playing week in and week out. But he knows how to get himself out of trouble. He keeps his eyes up when he's scrambling. And I think that's going to benefit the Broncos team as a whole.
I think Bo Nix is more ready to play than what I've seen from Drake May. Like the stuff I've seen from Drake May at Patriots training camp is like rather horrifying. His footwork is awful. Balls are late, inaccurate. And that doesn't mean he can't get there, but Bo Nix is ready to play. Like the things I've seen from Bo Nix, the ball's on time. His footwork looks outstanding. He knows what his footwork's supposed to be on every play. I would say it's weird to say. I hate the word pro ready, but like Bo Nix is way ahead of Drake May as far as preparedness to play in the NFL. And I really wonder, like, is he going to be, when you look at like who could be rookie of the year candidates, it's Caleb Williams, it's Jaden Daniels, and Bo Nix in
Mm-hmm.
that conversation is a guy who's going to get a lot of reps from week one on and going to stack a lot of stats and a lot of numbers. And that helps. Playing all year really helps when you want rookie of the year consideration. And I
Yeah.
think it's on the table for Bo Nix to be a rookie of the year candidate come the end of the season.
I know that these guys are nowhere near the same, but when you talked about Drake May, it reminds me specifically of Christian Hackenberg. Now, I know Hackenberg didn't go in the first round
Mm-hmm.
out of Penn State, so the expectations were a little bit different. But you want to talk about a guy who blew people away with kind of a big arm, didn't necessarily win a lot of games, but like flashed some NFL brilliance. Like that's kind of what I see and feel from Drake May. I don't want to pass judgment. All rookies to me get a chance to prove their merit, but that's what I feel like is I got a guy who's big and can throw football hard.
Dude,
Big guy throw football hard.
I don't even know that he throws the ball with exceptional velocity. Like I really legitimately don't get the Drake May thing. I don't get it. I've been trying to
I never got it.
understand,
Never
and I'm like,
understood
I
it.
don't know what. I think they're heading towards a disaster or a problem where he's going to sit on the bench for a long time. He's maybe in 2 years he's ready, but I just don't. I don't see Drake May getting there anytime soon. I'm really worried about that for his sake and for the Patriots' sake. They walked away from Mac Jones, who I think got royally screwed over with a horrible
Big
situation.
time.
And like you don't support him, you put a defensive coordinator at offensive coordinator. Like I don't know, man. I worry they walked away from a really viable quarterback and replaced him with Drake May, and are going to be waiting a long time till Drake May is ready to go in New England.
I think they did what New York did and drafted Daniel Jones. And I don't
Yeah,
think
it might
they're
be worse. It might be worse than Daniel Jones, honestly.
no clue.
Um, Last team we got to talk about the Raiders.
Raiders.
You sent me a text earlier today. You said the Raiders. What do you say? The Raiders are getting ready for disaster or something like that.
They're just about to be so garbage. I'm sorry. The roster's not good. You lost your best offensive piece in Josh Jacobs. I don't care how many pictures of Zamir White I see and how big he is. The dude doesn't tote the rock the
Hold up,
way
Devontae Adams doesn't exist.
he
Your second
does.
best offensive weapon
Yeah,
behind Devontae
Devontae
Adams.
Adams is the second best.
What? You think?
He's a Josh Jacobs running the football was more valuable to that team than Devontae Adams, simply because you don't have a quarterback to get the ball to him. And
Mm.
nothing changes this year. I know Gardner Minshew can kind of be a gunslinger and he'll throw him the ball, but he might throw 4 touchdowns. He might have also 4 or 5 picks. And that's a problem. Aiden O'Connell can't make all the throws. And I don't think there's enough talent anywhere else on that roster to make up for it. I think defensively, they were able to show some grit at the end of last year, if you will, and you've got Max Crosby kind of leading the way. But the team is just not good. Oh, you also signed Christian Wilkins, so you'll have a decently strong pass. They're not going to be very good. They don't have a good roster. They don't have a franchise quarterback. Yes, they have Devontae Adams, but at this point, he's just a Lamborghini in a trailer park.
Mm. I want to push back. I think Christian Wilkins paired with Max Crosby is going to be really fun to watch.
That's going to be so much fun to watch.
It's going to be, and it's going to create problems for opposing offensive lines. So that right there is going to really help anyway. Generating pressure, wreaking havoc on, because Max Crosby isn't just a pass rusher. He messes with the run game too. He's an outstanding defensive end. So like the defense is going to get a lot of help from your guys up front. Gardner Minshew, man, I'm so biased. I can't even give a decent, like, I love the guy so much. I love him. I went to college with him. I love him, dude.
I know.
Right, if the season started today, I think he's the backup, actually. I don't think he's ready to be the starting quarterback there. They paid him to be. He's got to earn the job in training camp, from what I understand. And Devontae Adams is always open. I don't know. I wonder what's going to happen. The thing that really is interesting with losing Josh Jacobs, they didn't replace him with anybody. They brought in Alexander Madison, who I think last played in Minnesota, Zamir White, Amir Abdullah. They don't have a running back, and maybe they don't need one. I realize running back's not exactly a premier position in the NFL, but there's no group on this team other than the defensive line and Devonta Adams. There's 3 players basically where you go, oh, they're really good. Otherwise, there's a lot of, we'll find out. And that's a real concern. Like, this is the worst team by far in the AFC West.
Also, I don't want to, we've had the kind of coach coordinator conversation. Luke Getsy is your offensive coordinator from Chicago.
Oh,
and now we can blame what happened in Chicago on Justin Fields, or I can't even remember who the backup was at the time. But bringing in Luke Getsy and marrying him with quarterbacks that are, quite frankly, more limited than Justin Fields physically, I'm not sure I love that for the Raiders.
No, that's a concern. Yeah, man. I really hope I'm wrong. I don't have a lot of excitement about the Raiders season this year.
Nope.
Another thing worth considering, they play a lot of like away games at home, basically, because so many, like, let's look at their schedule. But when you play, like, they played the Steelers last year in Vegas, it's a home game for the Steelers. Like, because Vegas is such a destination.
Yeah.
When you play Baltimore, they play Pittsburgh in Vegas again. That's a home game for the Steelers, basically. You play Kansas City in Vegas. You're telling me everyone's not going to fly from Kansas City to Vegas to watch that game?
Right.
I don't know, man. A lot of these games are, the home games they have are kind of fool's gold, because if you play any kind of team that's got a really good traveling fan base, that stadium in Allegiant Stadium is going to be filled with opposing fans. And so you're going to have a bad year. You're playing a lot of away games, even at home. It's going to be a long season for the Raiders, in my opinion.
Very long season for the Raiders.
Yeah. Do you want to pick a number value? Who do you think they can win if we look at their schedule? Carolina?
I think they've got 5 wins at most. I think that comes, with Carolina. I think they have a chance to beat the Bucks. Maybe the Saints. Maybe they got 3 wins.
5 is generous.
5 maybe feels a little bit generous.
Maybe they steal a win against Denver or the Rams, or like someone we don't expect, right?
Right.
And maybe they're better than we think.
Yes, maybe they're just better. We don't. again, back to what we were saying at the start of this kind of AFC West conversation. We don't know what a lot of these teams are going to be outside of Kansas City. Kansas City is the only sure thing in the division. Everyone else, it's kind of let's roll the ball out there and find out.
Here's we should have started with this, but this is important to say though. The value of predictions is it gives us a starting point. It sets our expectations here that we can judge the rest of the year against. The prediction isn't meant to be accurate. The prediction is meant to give you a starting point to base all further judgments on and against. So that when week one, if the Raiders beat the Chargers week one, we go, wow, that's a lot better than I expected because we predicted they were going to suck. And then week two, they beat Baltimore. We go, holy crap, they're 2-0. They've got 2 good wins in a row, right? But if they lose like we think they are, we go, yeah, we expected this. It's just a prediction is not meant to be accurate. I'm learning this the more I broadcasted. It's about setting an expectation and giving you like a landmark to base all further judgments against. That's why we do predictions. That's the value of doing that on the show. So, yeah, man, I think 3 to 5 wins is a really reasonable prediction for the Raiders that I feel good about.
Yeah, looking at it again, 5 does feel like a lot.
Yeah, and if you lose Max Crosby, he gets hurt. If Devontae Adams gets hurt, I mean, they have 3 good players on that team.
Devontae Adams just requests a trade after 2 weeks because he's sick of not getting the football. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Send him to New Orleans. He can play with his buddy again.
That'd be kind of nasty. Have him and Olave. Woo.
It'd be fun. But man, this was awesome. I appreciate it. I'm so like uptight about predictions that I could never allow myself to do what you did, which is good because I need to get predictions out. So it's actually, I'm really glad you brought that to the table and kind of forced me to put myself in a corner.
Yeah.
But this is a really good conversation. I want to do this for all quadrants, north, south, east, and west of the NFL.
Let's do it. And listen, worst case scenario, we're wrong. We look at it and we laugh.
But Nathan, the YouTube commenters are going to be mean to us. How can we ever live it down?
Whatever.
Some random guy we've never met in Oklahoma is going to make fun of us, Nathan.
Listen, I love to be made fun of. Throw all the jokes out there. At the end of the day, we do the best with the information that's in front of us to make an educated guess. And
I've got this piece.
Is an educated guess.
Dude, I get called out of bed every morning. I sell equipment. It gets installed. There's always, every fucking time, there's some stupid problem. It's not my fault. It's like something broke and I got to drive a part out. My life is so stressful now. Like between trying to coach, I've got quarterbacks I'm trying to teach how to read a defense. I've got other coaches I'm trying to build interpersonal relationships with. I'm trying to sell stuff, trying to run a podcast. Like, I don't give a fuck what anyone tells me. I've got parents yelling at me from like, the stands. I don't have energy to care anymore. I just like peacefully am like, I'm doing my best. It's genuinely, I give a great effort to everything I do. And if my best isn't enough, like that's all I have. I can't do better than that. So I'm very peacefully like, don't give a fuck anymore when anyone tells me or any criticism people have. It's like, I'm doing my best and take it or leave it.
Yeah. I love that mentality. In this world, you just can't take things personal and you really have to let things slide off your back. You can't sit there and be mad about something that somebody said last week. There's not enough time in the day to let stuff like that take your brain space, your mental space. Just don't give it the energy. You look at it, you laugh at it, you say, man, I wish I had the guts like you do to hop on the internet and type out something rude and never come. You know what I mean? Like, whatever.
Yeah.
It is what it is. Haters will be haters.
Yeah. Hey, man, great job. 3 hours is a pretty solid amount of time. I feel pretty good about this.
You might have to cut this thing up into 2 or 3 different ones.
Nah. It is what it is. Maybe see you next week. Do this again.
Yeah, I'll see you next week.
Okay, guys. Hey, Nathan, thanks for joining. Guys out there, I love you. I appreciate you. It's now literally exactly midnight. So we're going to go to bed. We both have work in the morning. You better appreciate Nathan and his time. This dude, I know how he works. And I don't have a sales call till 10 tomorrow, so I can sleep in. But Nathan, I mean, let's be real. I'll be editing till 3, but Nathan's got to get good to work. So love you, man. Thanks for being on. Thanks everyone out there. And bam, we are done.